Hello guys. Welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see the what if Naruto had the power of all devil fruits. Check the summary in the description. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's dive into the story. Konoha Streets. Early morning, Naruto trudged through the cobblestone streets with his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Dawn's gentle light cut through the mist, illuminating Konoha's curved rooftops and bright shop signs. He usually liked mornings. Fewer people roaming around meant fewer curious stares. Today, though, the village was already buzzing. Shopkeepers lifted shutters. Teams of shinobi hustled past, exchanging quick words about the academy. Everyone seemed excited for the day's special announcement. Naruto knew exactly why. His younger sister, Nanami, was expected to receive praise again. At 13, he had seen it all. The warm smiles from villagers, the encouraging pats on the head, all directed at Nanami. She was the star, the one who'd inherited their parents' formidable chakra reserves and genius. He was just Naruto, overshadowed since birth by a sibling 2 years his junior. People said Nanami was the village's golden child, the next big hero of Konoha. Naruto had no illusions about that. His father, the fourth Hokage, tried to show some measure of fairness, but the entire village's attention had swung irreversibly to Nanami. Even their mother, Kushina, who loved both of them, got caught up in that wave. Naruto didn't resent Nanami herself, not entirely, but the constant comparisons stung. He heard people chattering near the mission assignment boards. Everyone is so proud of Nanami-sama. She's already controlling the advanced sealing techniques at her age. She's definitely her father's daughter, like a second yellow flash. Naruto sighed and turned away. He tried telling himself it didn't matter what they said, it was just noise. But it gnawed at him. A swirling sense of frustration had built inside him over the last few years. He wanted to prove he wasn't just an afterthought. He walked faster, navigating the crowds until he reached the open courtyard outside the academy. Students flocked by, excitement on their faces. They greeted each other in animated voices, some discussing the upcoming test, others bragging about new jutsu they'd learned. That's when he felt it again. That strange, internal flicker. It was faint, like a warm ripple pulsing through his chest. He'd felt it a few times before moments of stress or anger usually brought it out. Naruto dismissed the sensation as some quirky anomaly in his chakra. But part of him wondered if it hinted at something more. He spotted a group of familiar faces. Kiba, Shino, Choji, Shikamaru, and a handful of others, standing on the academy steps. Some gave him polite nods. Others averted their eyes. Ever since last year, people had noticed how Naruto kept to himself. Rumors swirled that he was either incompetent or just plain weird. Yet, standing in front of that crowd, wearing a self-assured smirk, was Nanami. Her bright red hair had a few strands of blonde woven into it, a perfect reflection of their mother and father's heritage. She was smiling at something Shikamaru said, then waved over to a giggling group of girls. Naruto tried to brush past. Maybe if he hurried inside, no one would pester him with comparisons. "Hey, Oni-chan." Nanami's voice called out. She was the only one who used that affectionate term anymore. Naruto paused, forcing a half smile. "Morning," he said quietly. "Dad said he'd be at the academy later to watch our demonstration," she continued, stepping closer. "Guess they want to see if we're ready to move on to more advanced training." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Naruto almost felt guilty for the wave of bitterness that threatened to spill out. He shrugged. "That's good. You'll probably blow them away." Nanami frowned. "You always say that in such a distant tone. We never train together anymore. Are you okay?" There it was. That question that made him feel even more broken. He waved it off. "I'm fine. Just tired, that's all." Her worried expression lingered, but she let it go. "If you say so, good luck today," she offered. Naruto gave a curt nod. "Yeah, you too." He slid past her and headed into the academy building. Academy classroom. Later that morning, the rows of desks quickly filled with students. Naruto took a seat near the back, hoping to avoid attention. He noticed Hinata a few seats away, fiddling with her fingers. Ino was braiding her hair while whispering jokes with Sakura. Occasionally, one or two of them glanced at Naruto, but they didn't call him over. Iruka stepped in, wearing that same encouraging grin. All right, everyone, today, we have a special demonstration exam. The Hokage himself will be observing, so do your best. We'll be testing fundamental jutsu, taijutsu, and a bit of tactical skill. A buzz ran through the class. Everyone was eager to impress. Iruka's expression softened. We'll move outside shortly. First, remember that teamwork and discipline are crucial. Show your best side. He launched into further instructions, but Naruto tuned out. His mind drifted to that uncomfortable flicker in his chest. It was easy to hide his power if it never came out. But sometimes it did, unpredictably, and it frightened him. He recalled a moment from months ago. He'd gotten into a scuffle with a few older students who were mocking him. One of them grabbed at Naruto's arm, and suddenly his hand stretched. Not a simple extension like a chakra limb. It elongated freakishly, then snapped back. Everyone watching freaked out. The bullies had run off, spooked out of their minds, and rumors spread that Naruto had some demonic power. He swallowed hard. Could he afford to hold back anymore? He was tired of being overshadowed, tired of being called a nobody. Outside, the bright training field beckoned. Target boards had been set up, along with a makeshift sparring area. Iruka lined them up in squads, each waiting for their turn to demonstrate. Nanami's group went first. She performed a flawless shadow clone jutsu 5 clones at once, earning murmurs of approval from the onlookers. Then she layered a basic sealing technique, forcibly dispersing her own clone's chakra in a controlled manner. Minato, standing at the sidelines, nodded in approval. Village elders clapped politely. Naruto watched from behind the crowd. As expected, the demonstration was all about praising Nanami's talents. He clenched his fists. Next squad. Iruka beckoned Naruto's group. Kiba, Hinata, and Shino stepped onto the field with Naruto. They each took a turn demonstrating. Kiba unleashed a fang over fang technique. Hinata displayed gentle palm strikes, and Shino manipulated his insects with a calm precision. All respectable. Then, eyes turned to Naruto. Iruka cleared his throat. Naruto, your turn. Use any basic jutsu or skill you prefer. An awkward hush fell over the crowd. Some were curious, others looked disinterested. Naruto glanced at Minato. His father's expression was guarded. He was obviously worried about what might happen. Naruto inhaled a slow breath. Fine. He formed a single-hand seal shadow clone, the same technique that everyone else had already done 1,000 times. But in that moment, Naruto felt that flicker surge. For some reason, the chakra in him twisted. He tried to control it, focusing on a standard clone. Instead, something in his bloodstream burned. The flicker transformed into a roar, and his arms momentarily shimmered. Energy coursed through his body in a swirl that felt alien yet oddly potent. With a loud pop of smoke, a single shadow clone appeared. But everyone stared open-mouthed, not because of the number only one but because of the faint sizzling aura around Naruto's torso. Some spect is that. Before he could muster a quick explanation or dispel it, the energy crackled out. He coughed, stumbling backward. The clone vanished instantly. A swirl of wind kicked up dust around him. For a split second, his fingers felt rubbery, as if they'd lost their rigidity. He heard the crowd murmur. Is he cursed? He can't even control his own jutsu. What a disappointment compared to Nanami-sama. Naruto's vision blurred with red-hot anger. All that, just from a single slip of control. He shot a glare at the spectators, and then, just like that, the surging energy vanished. Iruka raised a hand, looking concerned. Naruto, are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine, he managed, though bitterness choked him. Minato stepped forward, clearing his throat. That's enough for now. We'll look into Naruto's condition separately. The disappointment in his father's voice stung far worse than the crowd's whispers. Naruto said nothing. He walked off the field, ignoring Iruka's worried gaze, ignoring the hush of speculation. Academy rooftop. Noon. Naruto hunched near the metal railing, the wind teasing at his spiky hair. Far below, the training grounds bustled with students finishing their demonstrations. He didn't want to watch anymore. Soft footsteps approached. He expected Iruka or maybe his sister. Instead, he saw Ino, her platinum blonde hair framing a curious expression. Hey, she said hesitantly, leaning against the railing. Thought I might find you up here. Naruto gave her a sidelong glance. Surprised you bothered. She shrugged. You looked upset. Figured I'd check on you. There was a moment of silence as they both stared over the courtyard. Ino cleared her throat. That jutsu thing you did, kind of weird, huh? He laughed harshly. Weird is putting it lightly. Everyone probably thinks I'm some incompetent clown. I don't know about that. Most people just seem confused. She flipped a strand of hair behind her ear. Your chakra felt off. I mean, I'm no sensor, but even I could sense it. Naruto didn't respond. Ino stepped a bit closer, voice dropping lower. You're not a clown. Yeah, you space out a lot, and maybe you don't show off your skills. But something tells me there's more to you than you let on. He snorted. Wish the others thought that. Ino gave him a small smile. Trust me, I can tell. You've got some kind of intensity inside you. Her words caused that strange flicker inside his chest again. It felt warmer this time, a rush that made him bold for no good reason. He tilted his head, meeting her gaze with a hint of challenge. You don't scare easy, do you? She smirked. Nope, it's going to take more than that to scare Ino Yamanaka. They stood like that for a moment, tension sparking. Then, without warning, Naruto moved closer, capturing her lips in a brief, impulsive kiss. It was a hungry, almost desperate act, fueled by the whirlwind of frustration he felt all morning. Ino's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she slid her arms around his shoulders, returning the kiss with surprising eagerness. Her heart hammered in her chest, and his did the same. For those few seconds, they forgot everything. The academy, the stairs, the disappointment. When they finally broke apart, Ino's face was flushed, her breath shaky. What was that for? Naruto let out a shaky exhale. I don't know. Maybe I just needed to feel something that wasn't anger. She processed his words, then brushed a thumb over her lower lip, a smile tugging at her mouth. Well, I can't say I hated it. Before either could say more, they heard footsteps on the metal stairs. Ino quickly took a step back, smoothing her hair. Naruto turned, heart still pounding. Hinata appeared, eyes darting between them. Oh, sorry, she stammered, cheeks pink. She looked like she might faint. Iruka-sensei asked if you two could come back down. Lunch break is ending. Naruto nodded, trying to ignore the heat on his own face. Yeah, sure. Ino winked at him as she headed down past Hinata. Hinata opened and closed her mouth, seeming to want to say something, but then she just turned to follow. Naruto lingered another moment, letting the wind cool his cheeks. That kiss had been reckless. He wasn't entirely sure why he did it. Maybe it was because Ino looked at him like he was someone worth noticing. And he hadn't felt noticed in a long, long time. Konoha Library. Late afternoon. The academy day ended with Nanami being congratulated by nearly everyone. Naruto slipped out unnoticed, heading for the quiet shelves of Konoha's library. He had a growing suspicion that this thing inside him wasn't normal chakra. He remembered the strange stretching from months ago, how his arms briefly shimmered with an aura earlier today. He found a corner among dusty tomes. The library had references on all sorts of chakra anomalies, kekkei genkei, and forbidden jutsu. He skimmed through volumes, flipping pages of thick parchment, but nothing resembled what he was experiencing. Occasionally, an odd line would catch his eye. Legends of intangible transformations, or reports of monstrous physical changes in certain bloodlines, but each account was either too vague or unrelated. He grumbled under his breath, this is pointless. He felt the weight of a stare. Peering up, he noticed a figure watching him from across the shelf. It was Shikamaru, arms folded. Studying, Naruto? That's unusual. Naruto closed the book. Something like that. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. You never struck me as the academic type. People change, Naruto muttered. A moment of silence. Shikamaru sighed. Look, I know you're not close with many of us, but rumors are flying about what happened today. Let me guess. They're calling me a freak. Shikamaru shrugged. Mostly, but I think it's more complicated than that. Strange powers in a shinobi world usually attract attention, dangerous or otherwise. I just hope you know what you're doing. Naruto didn't respond. He slipped the book back onto the shelf and turned to leave. Shikamaru's voice stopped him. I'm not judging you, but be careful. Anything that sets you apart could become a target. Naruto paused at the doorway. I've been a target my whole life. Then he walked out, letting the heavy library door close behind him. Training Ground 17 sunset golden rays stretched across the sky as Naruto made his way to a secluded corner of the village. Training Ground 17 was lesser used, overshadowed by tall trees and pockmarked from old explosive tag tests. He needed the isolation. He faced a battered wooden post. Okay. Let's see if I can make sense of this. Clenching his fists, he summoned chakra. A faint swirl of energy danced around him, but it felt crooked, as if two distinct forces wrestled inside. He tried to form a basic clone. The jutsu flickered, half-formed. Frustration boiled up, and that flicker roared again. Images flashed in his head, memories of strange phenomena. Intangible arms, rubbery limbs, bizarre sensations like electricity coursing through him. The post in front of him suddenly cracked, as if struck by an invisible force. Naruto blinked in shock. He hadn't even touched it. He lifted a trembling hand. What the? Without warning, a swirling mass of black haze flickered around his wrist, then disappeared. The wooden post creaked again, splintering further, as if something just smashed into it from an impossible angle. Naruto swallowed. This power wasn't typical chakra. It felt deeper, more primal, and it was scarily strong. He closed his eyes, searching for calm. If he could just control it, he might surpass everyone's expectations, even overshadow Nanami's bright star. But the risk of letting it slip uncontrolled, he grimaced. A rustling in the bushes jolted him to attention. He spun, heart pounding, ready to unleash whatever this was. But its pale eyes widened when she noticed his tense posture. Sorry, she murmured, stepping forward. I was just, walking by. Naruto relaxed, though he was still annoyed to be interrupted. You need something? Hinata looked at the cracked training post, then at him. Are you okay? She asked, voice gentle. He exhaled slowly, reminding himself Hinata wasn't out to mock him. I'm fine. Her cheeks flushed pink. I saw what happened earlier, and it was an accident. My jutsu messed up, that's all. Hinata took a shaky breath. No, that's not all. I've never felt chakra like that before. You shouldn't keep it bottled up alone, Naruto-kun. It might be dangerous. There was a softness in her voice that he found both comforting and infuriating. Don't pity me, he said quietly. I'm not, she insisted, stepping closer. I just don't want you to hurt yourself. In the fading sunlight, he could see her genuine concern. Hinata had always been kind, though she rarely approached him due to her shyness. Something about her presence softened his defenses. Thanks, he mumbled, but I have to figure this out on my own. Hinata nodded, uncertain. If you ever need help, I'll. He cut her off by lightly tapping her shoulder. I appreciate it. Really, but this is my burden. She lowered her gaze, seemingly accepting that answer for now. Then she mustered the courage to look at him again. That demonstration earlier, did you see how the elders looked at you? He clenched his jaw. Let me guess. They think I'm some demon who's overshadowing Nanami's spotlight. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. I heard some talk. They're worried about your unpredictability. Some want to control you. Naruto's fists tightened, that flicker of power threatening to break free. They can try. A moment passed in thick tension. Hinata bowed politely. I'm sorry, I just thought you should know. Thanks. She turned to go, pausing once to glance back, her eyes flickering with unspoken concern. He didn't move until she disappeared into the tree line. Then he let out a bitter laugh. So the elders were already plotting something. Perfect, as if he didn't have enough on his plate. He stared at his palms. If they're so scared of this power, maybe I should give them a reason to be. Naruto's apartment. Late night, the moon hung low and heavy over Konoha. Naruto's small apartment, a cramped studio space, was dimly lit by a single lamp. He sat cross-legged on his bed, replaying the day's events in his mind. Nanami's brilliant performance, his father's guarded expression, the villagers' dismissal, Ino's unexpected kiss on the rooftop. His thoughts drifted to that searing power lurking beneath his skin. It felt like an entire ocean roiling in his veins. He recalled the library's texts. None explained it. So where did it come from? He rubbed his temples. The memory of that day, months ago, kept creeping back. He'd woken from a bizarre dream, dark silhouettes swirling. A sensation like drowning in the deepest ocean. Then, by the riverbank on the outskirts of the village, he found himself coughing up water. Or had it been something else? He never remembered clearly. After that day, odd things started happening to his body. He considered telling Minato or Kushina, but the cold truth was that they were too preoccupied with Nanami's development. Besides, he dreaded how they might react. What if they saw him as a threat? Naruto's gaze flicked to the window, where the moonlight spilled in. He could sense the hush of the village. Everyone was safe, warm, and unsuspecting. A rare tear threatened at the corner of his eye. I'm tired of being invisible, I'm tired of being overshadowed. Before he could sink too deep into bitterness, the doorknob rattled softly. He shot upright. Who's there? The door slid open an inch. A female voice whispered, "It's me." Ino slipped inside, quickly shutting the door behind her. She wore a casual outfit, shorts and a sleeveless top, but her face was filled with nervous excitement. Naruto blinked. "Ino, how did you?" She smiled sheepishly. "I followed you after class. I know it's creepy, but I had to see you." He was at a loss for words. "Why?" Ino took a step closer. The light revealed the slight flush on her cheeks. "I can't stop thinking about what happened on the roof." His heart drummed. He hadn't expected her to show up at his place in the middle of the night. But the memory of that impulsive kiss also lingered in him. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't usually do stuff like this, but your eyes, Naruto. You looked so angry and lost today. And that kiss was different from anything I've felt before." He found himself smirking despite the swirl of emotions. "I didn't realize I made that big of an impression." Ino moved closer until she was inches away. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "You did, and maybe I'm being reckless, but I like a little recklessness." He didn't reply, instead sliding a hand around her waist and pulling her in. She leaned up, pressing her lips to his. This time, it wasn't a stolen kiss on a windy rooftop. It was a slow, deliberate collision of desire and curiosity. Her hands tangled in his hair. He felt the warmth of her body against his. They stumbled onto the edge of the bed, where he eased her down gently. The emotions in him blazed: anger, ambition, longing, defiance, all coalescing into a fierce, magnetic need. Their kissing grew more insistent, lips parting as their breaths came in hot, ragged bursts. In the flicker of the lamp's glow, Naruto's hand slid beneath her top, exploring the curve of her waist. Ino responded with a gasp, arching to meet him. Some part of him realized just how surreal this was. Ino Yamanaka, in his apartment, tangled in his arms. But he couldn't deny how good it felt to be wanted, to have someone see him not as a shadow but as a tangible presence worth touching. After a few heated minutes, they broke apart. Ino's cheeks were flushed, her hair messy from his fingers. She pressed her forehead against his, breathing heavily. "We should probably slow down," she managed, though her eyes hinted she wasn't entirely eager to stop. Naruto's own breath came in rough gulps. He nodded, though the tension between them still crackled. "Yeah, guess you're right." She settled beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. For a moment, they just listened to each other's heartbeat. In the quiet, his mind drifted. He wanted more of this feeling. Acceptance, desire, warmth. But a voice inside warned him that Ino had no idea what lurked beneath his skin. If she saw the monstrous side of his power, would she still want him? She shifted, noticing the faraway look in his eyes. "Hey," she whispered, "whatever's bothering you, I'm here if you want to talk." He swallowed. A part of him yearned to spill everything, but fear of her rejection held him back, so he only said, "I appreciate it, really." Ino softly kissed his cheek. "Then I'll stay for a bit. We don't have to do anything else, just be here." He nodded, surprising himself by how much he liked the idea. Their breathing evened out, and for a while, they just lay there in silence, letting the closeness chase away the day's bitterness. Hokage's office, same night elsewhere, in the tall structure overseeing Konoha, Minato paced behind his desk. He was flanked by a stern-faced elder and Danzo, whose bandaged eye hinted at hidden motives. Minato's tone was tight. "I won't approve any drastic measures. Naruto is still my son." The elder shook his head. "We're not suggesting we harm him, Hokage-sama, only that we must ensure the safety of the village. You saw what happened at the academy demonstration today. Something in him is unusual." Danzo's voice was calm but icy. Naruto's power, if left unchecked, could endanger us all. Minato's eyes flashed. He's a member of the Uzumaki Namikaze line, my son, and a citizen of Konoha. I will handle this personally. I will not have him treated like a test subject. Danzo's lips thinned. Personal feelings can cloud judgment. The entire village acknowledges Nanami's promise as the next heir to your legacy. But Naruto is more of an unknown factor, possibly a threat. Minato slammed a fist on the desk. That's enough, we're done here. The elder and Danzo exchanged glances. Reluctantly, they bowed and exited, leaving Minato alone. As the door shut, he sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair. He thought of his son's eyes today, how distant they'd looked. How had things gone so wrong? Minato loved both of his children, but it was true that the village had showered Nanami with adoration, leaving Naruto in the background. He knew his wife, Kushina, tried to help, but the gap kept growing. Minato gazed out the window at the moonlit village. He whispered, Naruto, I'm sorry. I promise, I'll find a way to make this right. Naruto's apartment. Pre-dawn, a faint glow of morning began to edge the horizon. Ino had drifted to a light sleep against Naruto's shoulder, but he remained wide awake, staring at the ceiling. His arm was around her, skin still tingling from where they'd touched. Part of him was amazed that this was real, that he'd shared such intimacy with someone. But overshadowing that warmth was the stark reality that the village was beginning to fear him. Gently, he slipped out from under Ino, careful not to wake her. He grabbed a thin blanket, draping it over her sleeping form. Then he moved to the window, peering outside at the quiet streets below. A million thoughts churned in his mind. He wanted respect. He wanted to prove he wasn't a nobody. But at what cost? The devilish swirl in his veins threatened to erupt each time he got emotional. He opened the window, letting the cool air wash over him. The morning star glimmered faintly in the sky. For a moment, he could almost sense a vast ocean calling him, though he'd never seen the sea beyond the land of fire's borders. In that stillness, he made a vow. I won't be silent anymore. I'll take my place, whether they like it or not. And if the village elders tried to contain him or treat him like a threat, he wouldn't hesitate to show them he wasn't helpless. He'd show them all. Behind him, Ino stirred, murmuring his name in her sleep. He glanced over, a hint of a smile on his lips. He wasn't alone in this. Maybe there were people who would stand by him, if only he let them in. His sister, too, might try to help, but he couldn't bring himself to trust that, not yet. He turned back to the window, exhaling the tension in his chest. Tomorrow, everything changes. Dawn over Konoha as the first rays of sun broke over the village walls. A shifting undercurrent of tension pulsed in Konoha's very atmosphere. People went about their business, shinobi prepared for missions, shopkeepers opened stalls, but an unease lingered. Rumors of Naruto's strange display at the academy had spread overnight. Whispers of danger, unpredictable, and wildcard passed from ear to ear. Meanwhile, Naruto stood on his apartment balcony, watching the sunrise with new resolve. The flicker inside him was stronger than ever, and he knew it was only a matter of time before the village tried to rein him in. But he wasn't going to be caged. Not anymore. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Naruto's apartment. Early morning, a faint gray light filtered through the window, illuminating the small space. Naruto lay awake, staring at the ceiling with restless eyes. Ino still slept beside him, curled beneath the thin blanket he draped over her. The warmth of her presence helped chase away the nightmares that usually plagued him, but it couldn't extinguish the silent storm in his mind. He rose carefully, not wanting to disturb her. A quick glance at the clock told him it was just after 5. The village wouldn't truly stir for another hour or two, but a restless energy itched at him. Training. He needed to push his limits and see if he could harness the roiling power inside instead of letting it erupt unpredictably. He slipped into a fresh shirt and pants, then paused. Ino had shifted, blinking sleep from her eyes. You leaving already? She asked groggily. Yeah, he said quietly, tugging on his shoes. Got some stuff to do. She rubbed her face. Training? He nodded. I just need to figure myself out. Ino sat up, letting the blanket slide off her shoulders. She studied him with an empathetic expression. Mind if I come along? I won't get in your way. Part of him was tempted to say yes, her company had proven comforting. But he also knew that letting her see the more chaotic side of his power might scare her, or worse, put her in danger. It's better if I go alone. She frowned but didn't argue. Okay. But be careful. Standing, she crossed the small space and pressed a lingering kiss to his lips. Warmth spread through him, momentarily calming the tension in his chest. When they parted, she offered a gentle smile. Don't get any crazy ideas about running off without telling me. He managed a half smile. I won't. Then he slipped out the door and into the cool morning air. Hidden training ground. Before sunrise, thin slivers of light cut across the forest floor, and the crisp scent of pine lingered on the breeze. Naruto leapt from branch to branch, silent except for the rustle of leaves beneath his feet. He chose a remote location at the outskirts of Konoha's training grounds, a place few bothered to visit. Upon landing in a small clearing, he inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. That flickering power responded, stirring in his core. It felt like a boundless ocean pressed into the shape of a human body. He formed a hand seal out of habit, recalling the standard forms of chakra control. Focus, he murmured. For a moment, he tried to create a simple shadow clone. His chakra flared, and indeed a clone appeared. But simultaneously, a strange ripple coursed through his skin. A slick black energy that momentarily coated his left arm. He glanced down at it. The black shimmer vanished quickly, leaving a faint tingle behind. Naruto clenched his fists. He remembered how, during the academy demonstration, everyone had witnessed something odd happen to his body. That had been enough to label him a freak, once again. Fine, he growled. Let's see how far I can push this. Shutting his eyes, he decided to drop the typical approach. This wasn't normal chakra, so maybe normal methods wouldn't help. Instead, he focused on the swirling sensation in his veins. He pictured it like a vast ocean with waves of different colors, some black, some fiery red, some shimmering like diamonds. A crazy mosaic of power. He exhaled and reached for that ocean. His right arm tingled, then, stretched, as though made of rubber. Quickly, he reeled it back, letting out a startled gasp. A memory flitted through him. The time he'd accidentally smacked a bully from halfway across the training field, not knowing how he'd extended his limb. Next, a wave of heat rose in his chest. Flames sparked along the edge of his fingertips before vanishing. No hand seals, no official ninjutsu. It was like the elements themselves were responding to him. Then came a swirl of darkness that conjured a pulling force, as if gravity was at his command. He quickly stomped his foot, stopping whatever effect threatened to occur. Okay, so it's not just one ability. It's multiple, he muttered. I can stretch like rubber, or produce flames, or do that weird invisible punch. Whatever this is, it's big. A sudden rustle of branches made him whirl around, adrenaline spiking. He half expected an Anbu operative or Danzo's goons. Instead, he found himself facing Hinata. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her face flushed. Sorry, ing forward with carefully measured steps. I saw you leave and just wanted to make sure you were all right. He let out a slow breath, forcing the tension from his shoulders. Hinata, you shouldn't sneak up like that. She dipped her head in apology. I didn't mean to startle you. A wave of guilt twisted in his gut. Hinata had always been gentle, always looking out for him in her own quiet way. He hadn't asked for her help, but here she was anyway. Why are you here? She fiddled with her fingers. I saw you at the academy yesterday, and after hearing rumors, I thought, maybe you'd want someone to train with. Or at least watch your back, in case something goes wrong. Naruto snorted. You heard about the freak show, right? She frowned. I don't think you're a freak. I think you're different, but not in a bad way. He studied her expression. She looked nervous but sincere. This power is unpredictable, Hinata. I don't want you getting hurt. She took a shaky breath, then lifted her chin in an unusual show of resolve. I'm the Hyuga heiress. I can handle myself. Despite himself, he cracked a small grin. Her stammering voice contrasted sharply with the determination in her eyes. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. She gave a faint nod, then activated her Byakugan. Veins bulged around her pale eyes as she surveyed him. Your chakra network is swirling in multiple layers. It's almost like you have more than one source of energy, she whispered. I've never seen anything like it. He shrugged. Neither have I. Do you want to try sparring? Hinata asked gently. We can see how you adapt in combat. He hesitated. Part of him didn't want to risk harming her, but the other part desperately needed to test his powers under stress. All right. Just stay alert. They moved to the center of the clearing. Hinata took her gentle fist stance, poised and elegant. Naruto steadied himself, focusing on that roiling ocean inside. He had no formal kata for these strange abilities, so he'd rely on instinct. She dashed forward, palm strikes aimed at his chest. He sidestepped the first blow, tapping into that intangible punch he'd unleashed on the wooden post. For an instant, a near-invisible wave burst from his fist. It collided with Hinata's block. She stumbled back, eyes wide. I didn't even see it, she said, regaining her footing. It's like you're striking with air pressure. He let out a breath. Your Byakugan can't see it? She shook her head. I saw your muscles tense, but the energy just erupted. No chakra shape, no seal. It's like it's bypassing normal channels. Naruto tried again, slamming a fist into the air. The recoil nearly knocked him off balance, but a swirling shockwave bent the grass and sent leaves scattering. Hinata managed to duck, eyes full of awe. Where is it coming from? She whispered. He had no answer. Instead, he lunged forward, testing his next hunch. His right arm tingled, then extended grotesquely to double its length, aiming to tag Hinata from a distance. She gasped but quickly danced out of range, her feet sliding gracefully. Naruto retracted his arm, feeling a momentary tremble. Using these abilities so blatantly drained him in odd ways, like each power tapped a different reservoir. Beads of sweat began to dot his forehead. He barely had time to catch his breath before Hinata surged in again, pressing the advantage. She aimed a palm strike at his chest. Instinctively, Naruto braced for impact and felt another shift in his core. His torso momentarily became intangible, as if her hand passed right through a swirl of mist. Hinata stumbled, shocked. Naruto's heart pounded. I'm sorry, he yelped, stepping back. That intangible effect had felt so foreign. Hinata stared at him, her Byakugan still active, mouth slightly open in disbelief. It's like your body turned to smoke, she whispered. No, it's not smoke. It's more fluid. He forced a grin to hide the unease churning in his stomach. Guess I can do that too. Are you hurt? She asked, scanning him. He shook his head. Just tired. Using these powers one after another feels draining. Hinata deactivated her Byakugan, stepping closer. Naruto-kun, you have to be careful. These abilities, they don't follow normal chakra rules. If the elders are aware, they might. Yeah, I know. They're probably plotting right now, he said bitterly. Memories of the academy day flashed back. The stares, the fear. Let them try something. Hinata's gaze fell. I don't want you getting hurt, or exiled, or worse. Naruto reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. Thanks, but I'm done hiding. If they corner me, I'll fight back. She looked conflicted, but nodded. Then, I'll stand with you. He blinked. You will? Yes. I believe in you, she said, cheeks coloring slightly. And I want to protect the people I care about. A warmth spread through him, different from the heat of his strange powers. He knew Hinata was shy and self-conscious, yet here she was, braving the unknown to stand by him. Impulsively, he took a small step forward, leaning in to press a quick, soft kiss to her forehead. Thanks. She blinked rapidly, face flushing a deep shade of red. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but all that came out was a little squeak. Despite the tension that lingered in the air, Naruto felt a smirk tug at his mouth. For a moment, he remembered how different kissing Ino had been, passionate and wild. With Hinata, the closeness felt calming. He pulled back. Let's, call that a morning. I need to get some rest before the day starts. Hinata could only manage a nod, still bright pink. He gave her a friendly wave, then turned to leave the clearing. Behind him, Hinata remained rooted in place, pressing her hand over the spot on her forehead where he'd kissed her, lost in a swirl of new emotions. Konoha Main Street, mid-morning. By the time Naruto walked into the heart of the village, the streets were alive with people. Shops bustled, vendors called out deals, and various shinobi milled around. He pulled his hood up a bit, not in the mood for prying eyes or rumors. He soon realized how naive that hope was when he caught snatches of conversations. Heard his demonstration was a disaster. Must be why the Hokage won't talk about it. Something abnormal. Dangerous if you ask me. Why not focus on the real prodigy, Nanami? Naruto's jaw set. The mention of his sister only fueled his resolve. He spotted a couple of academy classmates whispering and pointing in his direction. He met their eyes for a fraction of a second, and they averted their gazes, like they'd been caught gossiping about a cursed object. His hand twitched with the urge to show them just how cursed he really was. But he squashed that impulse, exhaling slowly as he continued walking. Hokage's office. Late morning tension thickened in the long corridor leading to his father's office. Naruto approached the door, noticing two Enbu stationed nearby. Their masks turned slightly as he passed, no doubt aware of who he was. He didn't let it rattle him. Inside, he found Minato reviewing a stack of documents at his desk. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, illuminating the lines of fatigue etched on the Hokage's face. Naruto cleared his throat. "You wanted to see me?" Minato looked up, surprise flashing across his features. "Naruto, I was about to send someone for you, actually. Close the door, please." Naruto did as asked, then stood near the desk. He waited, arms crossed, bracing for a lecture about losing control. Minato rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I heard about yesterday's demonstration, and I'm aware of the rumors. Are you all right?" His father's tone wasn't accusatory, but Naruto detected a hint of wariness in it. "I'm fine," he said evenly. "Why chakra?" Minato nodded slowly. "I won't pry if you're not ready to talk about it, but you should know that the council is unsettled. They've asked me to ensure you're evaluated medically." Naruto stiffened. "Evaluated? Like a lab rat? No, they want a thorough examination of your chakra pathways. You've displayed abilities that none of our med-nin can classify. They want to see if you're a danger." He bristled. "You mean they want to see if they can harness me?" Minato's lips thinned. "Danzo did imply that. But I refused any notion of forcibly containing you. You're my son, Naruto. I won't let them treat you like a threat." Naruto's eyes flicked to the window, glimpsing the village rooftops. "They already do." Minato looked pained. "I know. I'm sorry. I should have done better, made sure you felt supported." A moment of silence passed between them. Naruto saw genuine regret in his father's eyes, and it tugged at something deep in his chest. Finally, Minato stood, walking around the desk to stand beside Naruto. "Let's compromise. If you let our best med-nin, Shizune, do a discreet exam, it might calm the council's fears. You won't be locked up, and we can show that nothing is controlling you." Naruto exhaled through his nose. A part of him wanted to refuse outright, but another part realized this might buy him some time, keep the council from escalating. "Fine. But only Shizune, and only if I can leave whenever I want." Minato nodded. "Agreed." Before Naruto turned to leave, his father spoke again. "Listen, about your sister, she's worried about you. We all are." Naruto shook his head, forcing down a pang of bitterness. "You should worry more about the council. I can handle myself." Without waiting for a response, he stepped out of the office, ignoring the curious stares of the Anbu in the hall. Hospital wing. Midday Shizune's presence was comforting in its own way. A skilled med-nin under Tsunade's guidance, she had a calm demeanor that put most patients at ease. Naruto sat on the examination table, arms folded across his chest as she ran her chakra-laced hands over his torso and arms. Her brow furrowed. "Your chakra network is unusual, to say the least. I can sense multiple flows that don't seem to blend like normal. It's as though you have distinct pools of energy overlaying each other." Naruto made a face. "So I've been told." She withdrew her hands, letting the glow fade. "I don't sense any malevolent presence, like a sealed beast or curse mark. It's more chaotic. But your body seems to have adapted to it somewhat." He shrugged. "I've been experiencing weird stuff for a while." Shizune leaned back, making a few notes. "I don't see any reason for immediate concern, as long as you're not endangering yourself or others. But you should be cautious. There's no standard medical knowledge for this." Naruto nodded. "Good. Then we're done?" She offered a small smile. "Yes, I think so. I'll file my report that there's no immediate threat." Relief flickered through him. That would at least keep the council off his back for a short time. He hopped off the table, heading for the door. Just before he left, Shizun's gentle voice stopped him. Naruto, if you ever want more tests or help understanding what's happening, I'm here. And so is Lady Tsunade, if she ever returns to the village. He gave her a grateful nod. Thanks. Dango shop, afternoon. By the time Naruto emerged onto the bustling main street, his stomach growled. Sparring with Hinata and the tension of dealing with the council had left him drained. He decided to stop by a small dango shop. Inside, he found Enko leaning against the counter, munching on a stick of dango. She turned, brightening when she recognized him. Well, if it isn't the talk of the town, she teased, a mischievous grin forming. Naruto slid onto a stool and ordered a set of dango. I suppose everyone's whispering about me, right? Sure are. Danzo's little spies are in a tizzy trying to figure out your freakish powers. She snorted, biting off another piece. I love it when he's rattled. Naruto eyed her with mild surprise. Enko's carefree attitude was somewhat refreshing amid all the tension. You're not worried I'll blow up the village? She laughed. Kid, you're far from the only weird one around here. Trust me, I've seen worse. Besides, you've got a certain swagger that I like. He smirked. Maybe you just like pissing off the council. That too. They shared a conspiratorial grin. Then Enko offered him a piece of her dango. He accepted, brushing her fingers in the exchange. She gave him a bold once-over, her gaze lingering a bit too long. Naruto felt a flicker of heat that had nothing to do with devil fruit powers. He swallowed. So, you don't mind the rumors? She shrugged. People gossip. It's what they do. Doesn't change what's real. And what's real is that you've got something big brewing inside you. If you ever need a sparring partner, I'm game. I love a good challenge. His grin widened. I might take you up on that. She gave him a lazy salute and sauntered out, leaving behind a playful wave. Naruto blinked, momentarily distracted from his meal. That was interesting. A small thrill coursed through him. Maybe not everyone viewed him as a ticking time bomb. Training Field 17 late afternoon word must have spread that Naruto liked using this secluded training ground, because when he arrived, he found Ino there, waiting. She leaned against a tree, arms crossed. He approached, stomach doing a little flip when she smiled. Hey, he said. Hey yourself, she replied, walking over and looping an arm around his waist casually. How'd it go with the med nin? It was fine, actually. They won't lock me up yet. Ino rolled her eyes. They better not. I'll riot. He chuckled, then his gaze swept the training ground. Thinking of doing some more practice? She nodded. I want to see what you can do, too. Hinata told me a bit about your sparring this morning. Naruto arched an eyebrow. You and Hinata talked? She shrugged. We ran into each other at the academy. She seemed flustered. Didn't say much, but she asked me to watch out for you if she couldn't. Huh. He processed that. Hinata's concern touched him more than he wanted to admit, and Ino's direct approach was equally hardening. Ino's expression turned serious. Naruto, if you don't mind, show me something. Anything. I just want to understand. Part of him hesitated. This power had always brought him scorn or fear. But Ino was looking at him with genuine curiosity, not revulsion. All right, but stand back. He closed his eyes, focusing on the ocean of power again. A gentle swirling came to life in his gut. He held out a hand and imagined the intangible force that had shattered the wooden post. He felt the power surge, and a faint tremor raced through the air. A nearby boulder cracked down the center with a sudden, jarring snap. Ino gasped, covering her mouth. Naruto let the energy subside, exhaling shakily. She blinked at the shattered rock. That's so strong. No chakra seal, no incantation, nothing. He nodded. It's like an extension of my will. Tentatively, she stepped forward, placing a hand on his wrist. Does it hurt? Sometimes it's draining. My body isn't built for it, or maybe it is, but I haven't learned how to regulate it yet. Ino ran her fingers lightly along his forearm. I don't want you overdoing it, but it's impressive. Honestly, if I had a power like that, I'd probably freak out at first. You're handling it better than I would. He gave a half smile. You sure you're not scared? She tilted her head, eyes shining. Scared? I'm more intrigued. Her arms slipped around his neck, and he felt a familiar rush of heat as she pulled. It started gentle, then turned hungry. His hands slid around her waist, pulling her close. Sparks danced behind his eyes, the thrill of her closeness mingling with the aftershocks of using his power. They stumbled back against a tree, still locked in the kiss. Naruto felt her fingers tangle in his hair, her breath hot against his lips. All the frustrations and uncertainties melted away for a moment, replaced by the simple, electric connection of their bodies. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Ino rested her forehead against his, a smirk curving her lips. You have no idea how many girls at the academy had a crush on you. It's about time someone got through that stubborn shell of yours. Naruto chuckled, heart racing. Guess I just needed a push. She brushed her nose against his. Or two. He was about to kiss her again when he felt a presence at the edge of the clearing. They both turned to find a figure in Anbu gear, the white mask emotionless. Naruto and Ino separated, annoyance flaring in Naruto's chest. The masked Anbu spoke in a low tone. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Hokage wishes to see you immediately. Ino frowned. What's going on? The Anbu didn't answer her. Naruto sighed. Fine. Tell him I'll be there. The operative lingered a moment, as if gauging the situation, then vanished in a flicker of body movement. Ino's grip on Naruto's sleeve tightened. This doesn't sound good. He forced a confident smirk. I'll be okay. They probably just want another chat about village safety or something. Her gaze searched his, a flicker of concern. Please be careful. He squeezed her hand, then pulled away, hearts thumping in unison. With a nod, he began making his way toward the Hokage Tower once more. Hokage Tower. Early evening. Instead of Minato's private office, the Anbu led Naruto to a council chamber. Dimly lit, with a large table in the center, the room was occupied by several council members, including Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu. Minato stood at the head, arms folded, expression grim. Nanami was there too, seated off to one side with eyes full of concern. Naruto's stomach twisted at the sight of them all gathered like this. It felt like an ambush. Danzo's voice broke the silence. We appreciate you coming on such short notice, Naruto. Naruto crossed his arms. Not like I had much of a choice. Homura cleared his throat. We've reviewed the Mednin's report. There's no sign of a Biju or traditional curse. However, your abilities are well beyond a standard bloodline. This council would like to know where it came from. Naruto refused to break eye contact. I don't know. I just have it. Kaharu frowned. That's not acceptable. Powers like these can't appear out of thin air. They could be a threat to the balance of the village. Nanami jumped in, voice edged with frustration. He's still Naruto, my brother. He's never attacked anyone except in self-defense. This is ridiculous. Danzo's single visible eye narrowed. Perhaps, but if these abilities are not understood and contained, the potential risk is immeasurable. Naruto felt the power stir under his skin. He clenched his fists to keep it from flaring. Contained? You make me sound like a weapon. Isn't that what shinobi are? Danzo challenged softly. Minato slammed a hand on the table. Enough. I've told you all that Naruto will not be treated as a mere tool. We're here to discuss options to ensure both his safety and the village's. Danzo inclined his head in false respect. Yes, Hokage-sama. My root Enbu can offer specialized training that might help him control these abilities. Naruto scowled. I'm not letting your creeps experiment on me in some underground base. An uncomfortable hush fell. Danzo's composure slipped just a fraction. Mind your words, boy. Nanami stood abruptly, fists trembling. Dad, you can't let them do this. Minato's gaze moved between Danzo and Naruto. Naruto, what are your thoughts on receiving specialized training under more transparent conditions, of course? Naruto scoffed. I don't trust Danzo. That's all there is to it. Homura spoke, trying to sound conciliatory. Let's consider alternatives. Perhaps Jiraiya, or Tsunade if she returns could examine him. Danzo made a TS King sound. They're not present. My root, however. A sharp clang echoed as Naruto slammed his palm onto the table, the wood cracking under the pressure. No, I won't be your lab rat. Everyone went silent. Danzo's knuckles tightened on the cane he carried, but he held his tongue. Minato, trying to hold the peace, motioned for calm. We won't force anything tonight, but the council demands a solution soon. Nanami stepped around the table, placing herself between Naruto and the elders. Is that all? Kaharu and Homura exchanged glances. Yes, for now. But we expect an update. The longer we wait, the greater the unease in the village. Minato nodded wearily. Meeting adjourned. Danzo and the others departed, leaving Minato, Nanami, and Naruto behind. The tension in the air felt stifling. Nanami turned to Naruto, expression anxious. I'm sorry, Ni-chan. I didn't think they'd corner you like this. He shrugged off her concern. You're not the one pulling the strings. Don't apologize for them. Minato moved closer, voice low. Son, try not to let Danzo provoke you. He thrives on conflict, especially when he sees potential in something he can manipulate. Naruto's jaw tightened. I'm not going to be manipulated. A flicker of relief passed over Minato's features. I know. Just stay vigilant. He's not above underhanded tactics. Nanami's eyes glistened. Naruto, I wish I could do more to help. He turned to her, studying her conflicted face. Despite everything, she was still his sister. He reached out, ruffling her hair gently. Don't worry about me. Focus on your own training. Everyone loves you, so you've got a big legacy to live up to, right? She looked pained at his choice of words. Don't say it like that. You're important too. He forced a small smile. Yeah, sure. With that, he left the chamber, not wanting to prolong the awkwardness. Naruto's apartment. Night lights glowed from the few buildings that were still active this late. Naruto's footsteps felt heavy as he approached his door. The day had been one confrontation after another. He wanted to collapse onto his bed and shut out the world. When he opened the door, he found not just Ino waiting inside, but also Hinata. They seemed to be in the middle of a cautious conversation, looking at each other with uncertain eyes. The tension was palpable. Ino stood, arms folded. Hey. Hinata dropped by, said she was worried. I hope you don't mind that I let her in. Naruto blinked, shutting the door behind him. No, it's fine. He surveyed their expressions. What's going on? Hinata stepped forward. I heard about the council meeting. My father was there as a clan representative. He told me bits of what happened. Are you okay? Naruto sank onto the couch, exhaustion evident on his face. As okay as I can be after a bunch of old folks tried to corner me into going under Danzo's thumb. Ino's jaw clenched. That man's rotten. Hinata nodded, her voice softly resolute. I agree. Naruto looked between the two of them. They were so different, Ino bold and outspoken, Hinata shy but unwavering. Yet both were here, in his small apartment, genuinely concerned for him. The weight of their care pressed against the bitterness he carried inside. He swallowed. I appreciate you both. Really? Ino joined him on the couch, resting a hand on his shoulder. We won't let them do anything to you. Hinata sat on the chair opposite, hands clasped together on her lap. Yes. If they try, I'll speak out. Naruto let out a wry laugh. You two are risking a lot. Ayaja's favorite person right now. Ino rolled her eyes. Like that matters. If anyone has a problem, they can take it up with me. Hinata nodded in agreement. And me. A quiet moment passed, heavy with unspoken feelings. Naruto reached for Ino's hand, threading his fingers through hers. At the same time, he looked over to Hinata. She seemed torn, eyes dipping to the floor. It dawned on him that his closeness with Ino might be awkward for Hinata, who clearly harbored her own feelings. Still, a part of him perhaps fueled by the confidence gained from his strange powers and the sense of self he was finally forming found he didn't want to push Hinata away. He remembered the gentle brush of his lips on her forehead earlier that morning, and how her presence calmed him in a way that was different from Ino's fire. He lifted his free hand toward Hinata. Come here, he said softly. She glanced up, blush intensifying. Slowly, she rose and moved closer, seating herself beside him, though not too close. Naruto gave her a gentle smile, then did something impulsive. He shifted, letting go of Ino's hand, and reached for Hinata's. She tensed, but then relaxed as their palms touched. Ino's gaze flicked between them. For a split second, Naruto thought she might be jealous. But instead, she gave a knowing little smile. It was complicated, but she seemed to accept it. I'm not blind, Ino teased gently. I know Hinata's had an eye on you for ages. Hinata's face burned bright red. Aye, that's not. Naruto couldn't help but grin. It's okay. I like you both. The admission made Hinata's breath catch and Ino raise an eyebrow, a faint grin tugging her lips. "Oh, you're going there, huh?" He shrugged. "Let's not pretend this isn't happening. I don't want to choose between people who actually care about me, not yet." Silence stretched for a moment, thick with tension and uncertainty. Hinata's cheeks were still pink, but her eyes held a flicker of hope. Ino's mischievous smile softened around the edges. None of them had all the answers. This was new territory for everyone. Eventually, Ino broke the silence. "So, what now?" Naruto leaned back, letting out a long breath. "Now, I guess I figure out how to stay one step ahead of Danzo's schemes. I keep training, keep proving I'm not some ticking bomb." Hinata squeezed his hand gently. "We'll help." Ino nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Yeah. And if the council wants to cause trouble, they'll have to get through us." A warmth that had nothing to do with his powers filled Naruto's chest. He gave them both a grateful look. In that small apartment, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in ages. They spent the next hour talking strategies. How to refine Naruto's control over his powers, how to counter the political pressure from the council, and how to protect themselves if things escalated. Throughout the conversation, Naruto found it easier to breathe, easier to believe that maybe he could carve out his own path without losing himself to the village's demands or the monstrous side of his newfound abilities. When Hinata finally left, after politely bidding them goodnight, Naruto and Ino found themselves alone on the couch. Outside, the moonlight filtered through the window, casting pale silver lines across the floor. Ino curled against Naruto's side. "You're really going to juggle all this, aren't you?" He draped an arm around her shoulders. "Honestly, I don't know how, but I can't just push people away." She exhaled, resting her head on his chest. "I get it. Just make sure you don't neglect me in the process," she teased, though her tone carried a hint of genuine vulnerability. He pressed a soft kiss to the top of her head. "I won't." She let out a content sigh, and the two of them sat in silence, the only sound their steady breathing. Despite the chaos swirling around them, the council's looming threat, Danzo's scheming, the unpredictable nature of Naruto's powers, this moment felt peaceful. And for that fleeting slice of time, Naruto allowed himself to relax, trusting that tomorrow's battles could wait until morning. Outskirts of Konoha. Midnight. Beneath the veil of darkness, a lone figure stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking the hidden village. Cloaked in black, with a swirling mask that concealed their features, the figure watched the lights of Konoha flicker in the distance. The wind carried whispers of distant voices, the hush of leaves, and the faint pulse of a village steeped in tension. The masked figure's eyes narrowed, recalling the reports. A boy with impossible abilities, beyond normal chakra abilities rumored to rival even the legendary powers from distant lands. A soft chuckle broke the silence. Perhaps the Akatsuki would find this development intriguing. A power so unique could reshape the shinobi world. The figure vanished into the night, leaving only the rustling wind to mark their presence. Far below, Konoha slept uneasily, unaware that yet another threat had taken an interest in the boy no one had bothered to nurture until now. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Forest clearing near Konoha, dawn. Naruto awoke earlier than usual, still feeling the exhaustion of the previous day's confrontations. He slipped out of his apartment without rousing Ino, who had stayed over again, and made his way to an isolated clearing drenched in pale morning light. Dew beaded on the tall grass, and a fresh breeze carried the forest's scent. He needed space both physically and mentally. Danzo, the council, the constant whispers of freak, or danger, and even the complicated web of his new relationships weighed on him. Yet, beneath that turmoil, a pulse of excitement thrummed in his veins. Each time he tapped into his bizarre powers, the potential felt limitless. He inhaled deeply, steadying his mind. Soft golden rays peeked through the trees. A gentle rustle came from behind a thick oak. Naruto's posture tensed, half expecting a lurking Anbu or an eavesdropper. But Hinata emerged instead, wearing her usual jacket and a warm smile. "You again?" he teased, though his voice held no irritation. She came closer, gaze lowering briefly. "I'm sorry, am I bothering you?" He shook his head. "No, just surprised you're up so early." Hinata clasped her hands together. "I've been training harder, and I wanted to see if you're okay after yesterday. There were a lot of rumors." Naruto huffed. Rumors, rumors. I'm getting used to them. His eyes softened, but I appreciate the concern. They stood quietly for a moment, the morning stillness wrapping around them. Hinata summoned her courage and spoke. We should train together. You mentioned you're trying to balance these abilities. My Byakugan might help spot any changes in your chakra flow. Naruto eyed her carefully. He remembered how she'd reacted when he used that intangible smoke-like transformation. You sure you're not scared of what you'll see? Her voice remained steady. I'm more scared of what will happen if you don't learn control. He couldn't argue with that. Fine. Just keep your distance if it gets weird. They moved deeper into the clearing. Hinata activated her Byakugan, veins rippling around her pale irises. Naruto felt the ocean of power swirl in his chest, responding to the tension of a potential spar. He began with an experimental approach, focusing on a single devil fruit-like ability at a time. First, he attempted the rubber-like stretch of his limbs. His right arm elongated at the elbow, a grotesque but oddly fluid extension. Hinata observed, quietly awestruck. Then he tried summoning that invisible shockwave. The air rippled as he punched, uprooting a small patch of grass a few meters away. Birds fluttered from the treetops at the sudden disturbance. Hinata gasped softly. It's like your chakra changes density, she murmured. No, that's not it. It's as if a separate side your normal chakra coil. I can't see the energy lines at all. Naruto allowed his arm to return to normal, panting from the exertion. So it's basically invisible to the Byakugan? She nodded. Yes. I can only see it when it collides with something. Naruto rubbed his wrist, feeling that strange strain again. Using too many different abilities in a row, it's like mixing oils and water. My body doesn't like it. He paused. Let's push a bit further. Hinata hesitated. Are you sure? If your body's protesting, maybe we should. I'm not going to learn my limits by tiptoeing, he said firmly. A flicker of determination lit her eyes. All right, but if it goes wrong, I'll intervene. He cracked a grin. Deal. Naruto turned to one of the larger trees. He breathed out, feeling for that wave-like sensation of intangible transformation. Come on, he muttered, imagining himself dispersing into mist or smoke. Just like before, his body flickered, edges going semi-translucent. And then he stepped forward right through the thick trunk. It happened in a flash. Part of him remained on the near side, part slid through, and he stumbled out the other end, heart-hammering. Hinata's eyes bulged. Naruto, are you okay? He dropped to one knee, sweat trickling down his temple. The momentary split had felt horrifying, as though his cells had scrambled. A wave of nausea swept him. Still, he managed a breathless laugh. That was insane. Hinata rushed over, placing a hand on his back. Don't push it further. That was too risky. He fought down the queasiness and nodded. I'm fine. Just gotta pace myself. He steadied himself on her shoulder, grateful for her support. Let's go back. I think that's enough for one morning. She helped him to his feet, worry coloring her features. Sure, I'll walk with you. As they made their way out of the clearing, the sun climbed higher, gilding the forest leaves with a soft glow. Naruto gritted his teeth against the throbbing pulse in his body. He'd glimpsed the possibility of passing straight through solid objects. That was on top of rubber limbs, invisible shockwaves, and who knew how many other latent powers. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Hokage residence. Mid-morning word reached Minato that Naruto had been in the forest training again, prompting concern from the few Enbu watchers tasked with keeping an eye on him. Meetings with the village council loomed, and the tensions were only growing. Even so, Minato had chosen to handle the situation with patience rather than force, despite Danzo's constant prodding. Now, in the courtyard of the Hokage residence, Minato stood with his wife Kushina and daughter Nanami. Rays of sunlight caught Nanami's red blonde hair, almost forming a halo around her. She was performing a new sealing technique under Kushina's watchful eye, her chakras swirling delicately. A perfect demonstration, the kind that had made her the darling of the village. But Minato's mind was elsewhere. He wondered if Naruto was pushing himself to some dangerous edge. Kushina seemed to sense his distraction. Worried about Naruto, huh? She asked, glancing at her husband as Nanami finished the seal with flawless precision. Minato sighed. Yes. He's discovering new facets of his power every day, far beyond normal shinobi parameters. Danzo's pressure is only intensifying. Nanami approached, having completed her exercise. Dad, why don't you just stop Danzo? You're the Hokage. It's not that simple, Minato explained. Danzo wields influence among the elders and certain clans. If I openly overrule him on everything, it could fracture the village's political balance. Kushina placed a hand on Nanami's shoulder. We also have to think about Naruto's well-being. Too many factions want to exploit or control him. Nanami's fists clenched. I hate that everyone's turning on him just because of some weird abilities. Minato's face softened. He's not alone. There are those who care about him. He just needs time, and we need to manage the council. I only hope he doesn't do anything rash. Nanami nodded, trying to hide the frustration swirling in her heart. She adored her older brother despite their differences. She just wished she could get through to him before things escalated. Konoha Market District. Noon. Naruto and Hinata's walk back from the forest took them through the bustling market. Vendors shouted prices for fresh produce, curious shoppers wandered from stall to stall, and children ran around with sweets in their hands. Hinata kept an eye on Naruto, noticing how occasionally he'd rub his shoulder or wince as if his muscles hurt. She worried the intangible phasing he'd done had left some lasting strain. But he waved off her concern each time she asked. They passed by Yamanaka flowers. Ino stepped out, her expression brightening when she spotted them. Hey, she called, trotting over. Hinata gave a polite bow. Naruto could sense the small undercurrent of tension. The harem dynamic was still new, and while Hinata and Ino were friendly enough, each had her own feelings to navigate. Still, they seemed determined not to let it devolve into a messy rivalry, at least not yet. Ino leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to Naruto's cheek. Where have you been? I looked for you earlier. Hinata answered softly. He was training in the forest. I was just assisting. Ino's gaze flicked between them, picking up on Naruto's slightly fatigued posture. You okay? He nodded. Just tested a new feature, he said wryly. Kind of wore me out. Ino pursed her lips. I keep telling you not to push it too hard. There's no point in crippling yourself. I know. He tried to change the subject. Anyway, you hungry? I could eat an entire buffet. That got a grin out of Ino. Sure, I'm starving. Let's head to the dango shop or maybe Ichiraku's, your treat, right? Hinata perked up. Ichiraku's is usually quieter at this hour. Naruto shrugged. Ramen it is. He might be overshadowed in the eyes of the village, but a good meal with people who genuinely cared about him felt like a small victory. They set off, weaving through the busy streets. A few onlookers still whispered when they noticed Naruto, some with apprehension, others with suspicion. Yet, as they passed, Ino either glared or rolled her eyes at the gossipers, and Hinata kept her head high. For the first time in a while, Naruto felt a measure of confidence walking openly with them. Ichiraku ramen. Shortly after noon, steam rose from the huge bowls of ramen that Tucci, the shop owner, placed before them. Naruto inhaled the scent of miso broth and felt his stomach growl. They dug in, the atmosphere lightening as they exchanged small talk about the day's events. Halfway through his third bowl, Naruto noticed a familiar presence behind him. He turned to see Shikamaru approaching with his usual laid-back gait. The Nara gave a lazy wave. Mind if I join? Shikamaru asked, hooking a thumb toward the seat beside Naruto. Sure, if you can handle paying for your own bowl, Naruto quipped. Shikamaru rolled his eyes. Troublesome, he muttered, but sat down. Ino blinked in surprise. What's up, Shika? You don't usually come all the way to Ichiraku's at midday. Shikamaru shrugged. Got bored at home, and I needed a break from the new clan responsibilities. Besides, rumor has it Naruto's been stirring up half the council. Thought I'd see if he's still in one piece. Naruto's gaze hardened briefly. Yeah, they're not done with me yet, but I'm not exactly helpless. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. That's what I heard. Something about freaky powers. He paused, looking genuinely curious. You all right, man? Better than all right, Naruto answered, letting a bit of pride slip into his voice. Just gotta keep an eye out for Danzo's next move. A quiet tension sets no idle threat. Danzo's manipulations had brought down many a shinobi who stood in his way or who piqued his interest. Shikamaru let out a slow breath. Well, if things get dicey, you know you have some allies. Ino nodded in agreement, and even Hinata mustered a determined smile. Naruto felt a flicker of warmth. It was easy to forget that, in Konoha, not everyone blindly followed the council's fearmongering. Tucci returned with Shikamaru's ramen, and the conversation drifted to lighter topics: new missions, upcoming academy tournaments, and general shinobi gossip. Naruto tried to savor this small oasis of normalcy. He had no idea that in a few short hours, chaos would break loose. Konoha gates. Mid-afternoon, the echo of frantic footsteps rattled across the stone path leading into Konoha. A trio of leaf shinobi raced through the massive gates, bandaged and bruised from what looked like a fierce battle. The gate guards quickly guided them to the nearest medical station. Their voices rang with urgency. Attack near the river pass, ambush by unknown shinobi. They used strange techniques, we couldn't even see half their attacks. Send reinforcements now. A messenger darted to relay the news to the Hokage. Within minutes, alarm bells echoed through the village, summoning available squads to report for an emergency meeting. Hokage Tower. Emergency briefing. Minato stood at the front of a hastily assembled group of Jonin and Chunin. His expression was grave. The infiltration report from the wounded team was dire. An organized group of enemy ninja had attacked a supply caravan a few miles from Konoha's western border. Their jutsu were unfamiliar, and their motives unclear. Some casualties, some kidnapped. The seriousness of the situation was unquestionable. The village must respond, Minato said, scanning the faces of his assembled shinobi. We can't allow rogue forces to strike so close to our territory. Among those gathered were Kakashi, Guy, Asuma, Kurenai, and other senior Jonin. Also present were a few promising Chunin, including Shikamaru, who'd been roped in for his strategic mind. Nanami stood near the front, her fists clenched at the news of the ambush. A voice spoke from the side. Hokage-sama, should we consider using additional resources? Minato turned to see Danzo step forward. You refer to Naruto, correct? Danzo inclined his head. He possesses unique abilities that could turn the tide quickly if deployed correctly. A wave of discomfort passed through the shinobi ranks. They all knew the rumors about Naruto's powers, but few had seen them in action. Minato's jaw tightened. Naruto is still in training, and we do not fully understand his capabilities. I won't send him on a dangerous mission just because his powers are unusual. Nanami's eyes flicked between her father and Danzo. She could see the subtle interplay, Danzo testing how far he could push. Danzo leaned on his cane. Of course, Hokage-sama. But do remember that an unknown threat requires every advantage. Before anyone could respond, Kushina, who had accompanied Minato, spoke sharply. We do not gamble with my son's safety to fulfill your personal agenda, Danzo. The old war hawk's lips thinned. The rest of the room tensed, uncertain how this confrontation might escalate. Minato regained control of the briefing. We'll form specialized squads. Kakashi, Kurenai, take your teams and investigate. Nanami, you'll join Squad 4. Your sealing skills might be invaluable. The rest of you, be on standby for additional support. Danzo said nothing more, merely bowing slightly as the meeting ended. Minato dismissed the group, leaving him to brood near the doorway. A flicker of speculation passed through Danzo's eyes. Maybe there was another angle to exploit. Training Field 17, late afternoon. Nanami's heading out, Ino said, relaying the news to Naruto. I heard she's part of an emergency squad. They stood together amid the tall grass. Naruto's face was grim. Figures. She's the golden child, they'd trust her with anything. Meanwhile, they look at me like I'm a threat. Ino sensed the bitterness. Don't let it eat you up. You're forging your own path. Naruto inhaled slowly. Something was gnawing at him. If the village was under threat, part of him wanted to help. He had the power to do so, maybe more power than any single shinobi. But the council wouldn't let him fight, or if they did, they'd want to control his every move. Maybe I should just go, he said abruptly, surprising Ino. They can't stop me if I leave the village on my own to track these guys. She blinked. Are you sure that's a good idea? That might only give Danzo more ammunition to label you a rogue. He exhaled in frustration. Yeah, I know. His eyes scanned the horizon. I just can't stand by while my sister and everyone else put their lives on the line. Ino placed a hand on his shoulder. I get it, but maybe there's a smarter way. He turned to her. I'm listening. She chewed her lip. You could approach your dad directly. Offer to help under his supervision. Show him you're not a loose cannon. A short laugh escaped him. You think he'll risk it? He's torn between his duty as Hokage and the council's paranoia. Ino stepped closer, resting a hand on his chest. He's still your father, and you're not just a random weapon. If you present a solid plan and if you really are capable of controlling yourself, he might let you help from the shadows. Naruto considered it, though doubt still lurked in his mind. Still, if he wanted a chance to prove himself in a real crisis, maybe he had to do it the proper way. Hokage's office. Early evening. Naruto arrived unannounced. The Anbu outside seemed uncertain whether to stop him, but ultimately let him pass, likely recalling Minato's instructions not to antagonize him unnecessarily. Inside, Minato stood at his desk, rifling through mission logs. His head snapped up when Naruto entered. A flicker of relief and apprehension crossed his face. Naruto. Naruto shut the door behind him. I heard about the attack. I want to help. Minato's features hardened slightly. It's dangerous out there. We don't know who's behind these ambushes. Some suspect rogue factions from the land of Earth. Others fear a new criminal group. I'm not asking to walk into their camp alone. Naruto struggled to keep his voice level. But I have abilities that could catch them off guard. Isn't that exactly the advantage we need? Minato rubbed his temples. Son, the council. I know what the council says. Naruto cut in, frustration coloring his tone. But you're the Hokage, not them. You decide how missions are assigned. A tense silence followed. Minato studied his son's posture, noting the set jaw and the resolute eyes. Slowly, he put down the scrolls. You're sure you can control these powers in real combat? He asked quietly. Naruto thought of his recent training in the forest, the intangible phasing, the rubber limb attacks, the shockwaves. I'm learning. It's not perfect, but I won't endanger our allies. Minato exhaled a long breath. All right. I'll do this under strict conditions. You'll join a small recon unit that leaves at dawn tomorrow. Their job is to gather intel and, if possible, disrupt the enemy's supply lines. Your primary objective is not direct confrontation. If you run into trouble, you pull back. Understood? A surge of excitement and relief crashed through Naruto. Yes, sir. Minato hesitated, then placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. His eyes glimmered with paternal concern. I'm trusting you, Naruto. I don't want to see you hurt or used. Naruto nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you, Dad. It was the first time in a long while that word, Dad, sounded less resentful on his tongue. Naruto's apartment. Night news traveled fast. By the time Naruto and Hinata were already there, anxious to hear how the meeting with Minato went. He explained that he'd be leaving at dawn for a recon mission. Ino's response was immediate. You sure I can't come? I'm tired of being sidelined. Hinata looked equally eager. They'll need medical support or trackers, right? Naruto shook his head. It's a small unit. Father specifically asked for stealth. He wants to keep my involvement under the radar. Bringing more people would raise suspicion. Ino sighed, crossing her arms. Then at least promise to be careful, and come back in one piece. He gave a half smile. I'm not planning on dying out there. Hinata stood by the window, moonlight catching her pale eyes. Let us know as soon as you return. I can help with healing if you're injured. She sounded worried. Naruto walked over to her, gently brushing her cheek with his fingers. I'll be okay. I promise. Ino joined them, pressing close to Naruto. Her gaze flicked between them all. At least let us say a proper goodbye. Naruto was about to ask what she meant when she caught his chin, tilting his face toward hers. She kissed him a slow, lingering kiss that ignited warmth in his chest. Hinata watched, cheeks flushing, but didn't look away. When Ino pulled back, a mischievous gleam lit her eyes. Your turn, Hinata. Hinata's blush deepened. She cast a nervous glance at Naruto, who smiled softly and reached for her. She let out a shaky breath, then stood on her toes to press her lips gently against his. It was tentative at first, but Naruto slid a hand to the small of her back, drawing her closer. Her lips parted in a tender, trembling surrender. Ino observed them, a strange mixture of amusement and mild jealousy flickering across her face, but mostly, acceptance. She placed a hand on Naruto's arm, and soon he was caught between them, Hinata's shy warmth and Ino's confident allure. The kisses grew more heated, bodies pressing close. Naruto's heart hammered at the realization. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined such a moment. The friction of clothing and the taste of salt on their skin filled his senses. Ino's hair brushed his cheek. Hinata's breath was soft against his neck. After a time, they all pulled back, breathing heavily. The air felt charged, the intensity bridging them in a way none of them had fully anticipated. Hinata clutched Naruto's shirt, her face buried against his chest, while Ino ran her fingers lightly through Hinata's hair in a surprisingly gentle motion, as if comforting her. Naruto looked down at them, voice husky. "I'd stay like this all night, but I should get some rest. Dawn's coming soon." Ino chuckled breathlessly. "If you need rest, we should let you sleep." Hinata nodded, stepping back with clear reluctance. "Yes, sorry, we got carried away." Naruto drew in an unsteady breath. "Not that I'm complaining." Ino grinned, sliding her arms around Hinata for a quick, almost conspiratorial hug. "We'll walk out together. Don't stay up too long." Both girls pressed a final kiss, one on each cheek, and left quietly, leaving Naruto standing in the faint lamplight, heartbeat still pounding. He replayed the last few minutes in his head, a swirl of emotions surging. Desire, affection, confusion, determination. Eventually, he forced himself to calm down, remembering the mission ahead. Tomorrow would be a test of his powers, his control, and his resolve. He blew out the lamp, letting darkness cloak the room. As he crawled into bed, he found it impossible to sleep at first, still buzzing with the warmth of the moment shared. Eventually, exhaustion won. Konoha's western gates, dawn. A small squad of shinobi gathered at the edge of the village. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Among them were two Jonin Sai and Yugo, tasked with leading the recon. They waited, scanning the horizon. Naruto arrived last, stepping up with a curt greeting. Both Jonin assessed him with unreadable expressions. Yugo spoke first, her violet hair tied back. "Hokage-sama told us you'd be joining. This is a stealth mission. You good with that?" Naruto nodded. "I'll manage." Sai, typically reserved, added, "We move quickly. Collect intel, disrupt supply lines. Avoid direct conflict if possible." Naruto recalled Minato's warning. He swallowed any retort about his abilities, instead matching their serious tone. "Understood." Yugo glanced at the squad. Besides Naruto, there were two more Chunin. A sensor type named Shiori and a weapon expert named Riku. It was a modest team, but each member was handpicked for stealth and quick strikes. "All set," Yugo said. She formed a brief series of hand seals, and the group dashed out, leaving Konoha behind. Dust rose from the ground in their wake. The mission had begun. Forest trails, mid-morning. They traveled swiftly across rugged terrain, following old footpaths hidden by dense foliage. Occasional stops let Shiori sense for enemy chakra signatures. She reported faint trails leading west, confirming the attackers likely retreated deeper into Fire Country's borderlands. Naruto kept pace, ignoring the mild ache in his arms, a residual effect from yesterday's training. He focused on synergy with the squad, reminding himself they were not the enemy. They were his allies, even if they eyed him with mild uncertainty. Hours later, as the sun climbed high, they slipped through a narrow pass bordered by jagged cliffs. Shiori suddenly halted. "I sense multiple chakra signatures ahead. Roughly a dozen, maybe more." Yugo motioned for silence. "This must be the enemy base camp or an outpost. We proceed carefully." They crept forward, eventually peering over a rocky ledge. Down in a hidden valley, tents and supplies sprawled around a makeshift camp. At least 15 armed shinobi milled about, some wearing nondescript gear, others sporting partial masks. Scorch marks littered the ground, suggesting recent battles or training sessions. Naruto felt a stir of unease. Who were these people? Sai produced an ink scroll, preparing to send small chameleon-like ink creatures for a closer look. Naruto observed from behind a cluster of rocks. The squad leader's plan was straightforward. Gather intel, confirm if this was the group that attacked the caravan, and sabotage their resources if possible. Naruto's senses pricked. A swirl of black energy tightened in his chest, as if responding to the tension. His nerves hummed. This was his chance to test his strange powers for real, but he couldn't act rashly. Hidden Valley Camp. Late afternoon, they spent hours observing. Through Sai's ink creatures, they identified an armored leader giving orders to subordinates. At one point, a group of captured civilians was dragged out from a tent, likely survivors from the ambushed caravan. Naruto's fists clenched as he saw the rough treatment. Yugo's voice was barely above a whisper, "We have to rescue them." Sai nodded. "We can't leave them here. If we wait too long, they might be moved or worse." Naruto's blood pounded. "Let's move, then." Yugo signaled Shiori and Riku to circle around, providing a distraction from the east. She and Sai would approach from the north. Naruto was to loop behind the tents, free the prisoners if possible, and destroy any supplies that looked critical. The plan hinged on speed and stealth. They moved into position under the fading light, the sky bruised with purples and reds. Naruto steeled himself, remembering Minato's words. No direct confrontation. But seeing civilians in chains ignited his rage. He had to keep his emotions in check or risk losing control of his powers. A sudden explosion to the east, courtesy of Riku's well-placed explosive tags, signaled the start. Alarms sounded in the camp, and enemy shinobi rushed to respond. From the north, Sai's ink beasts lanced forward, tangling foes in inky illusions. Shurikens whizzed through the air. Naruto slipped through the chaos like a ghost. His heartbeat thundered. He neared the tent where the prisoners were held, 2 guards on alert at the entrance. Now, he summoned that intangible shift. Heart hammering, he held his breath and walked straight through the canvas wall, ignoring the queasy feeling as his body flickered. Inside, the prisoners were huddled together, their wrists bound. They gasped at his sudden appearance. "Quiet," he whispered, kneeling to work on the ropes. "I'm here to help." One older merchant trembled, but nodded. Please." They took the others somewhere else." Naruto frowned. "Others?" Before he could press for details, muffled shouts sounded outside. The guards must have realized something was off. Naruto's adrenaline spiked. He used a small shockwave from his palm to tear through the back wall of the tent silently, then gestured for the prisoners to follow. They scampered out. A moment later, the guards burst in through the front, finding nothing but the remains of shredded canvas. Naruto guided the prisoners along the edge of the camp, taking advantage of the growing darkness. They nearly made it to a rocky outcrop when a surge of enemy chakra flared. 4 masked shinobi dropped from above, blocking their path. Naruto positioned himself between the prisoners and the masked foes. "Go," he shouted over his shoulder. "Get to the tree line." The captives hurried away. Naruto faced the enemies, his heart hammering in anticipation. He promised Minato he wouldn't engage in a full-on battle, but these guys weren't giving him much choice. One of the masked shinobi lunged, a blade flashing. Naruto dodged, then let a burst of rubber-like elasticity fling his elbow forward. The enemy yelped as Naruto's arms stretched unnaturally, smacking him aside. Another shinobi hurled a barrage of kunai. Naruto's body flickered intangible for a moment, letting the knives pass through harmlessly, then re-solidified in a single breath. The foes faltered, clearly rattled by these bizarre abilities. Naruto took advantage, launching a shockwave punch that knocked 2 of them into a tent pole. The structure collapsed with a crash. A high-pitched whistle cut the air. One more enemy rushed in from his blind spot, brandishing a short spear. Naruto reacted on instinct, summoning a swirl of dark smoke around his hand. He felt a gravitational pull intensify, yanking the spear right out of the foe's grip. With a flick of his arm, he sent the weapon slamming back at its owner, forcing the shinobi to dive aside. Breathing heavily, Naruto forced down the rising wave of nausea. He was juggling multiple powers in quick succession. Too many. His vision wavered briefly. He had to wrap this up. "Look out!" a voice called. Naruto turned to see Yugo dashing over, her sword glinting as she intercepted another attacker. Sparks flew when blades clashed. "You okay, Naruto?" Yugo asked between parries. He nodded, chest heaving. "Just a little dizzy, but I got the prisoners out." Yugo slashed through the last masked shinobi with quick precision. "Good work. Let's retreat before reinforcements swarm." Explosions echoed from the far side of the camp, likely Riku and Shiori continuing their sabotage. Flaming tents lit the twilight. Sai's ink tigers roared in the distance, tangling more enemies. This was no small skirmish. Some of these rogue shinobi were obviously skilled. Naruto and Yugo joined up with Sai, Shiori and Riku near the camp's outer perimeter. There was no time for a lengthy celebration. More enemy ninjas streamed in, alarmed at the infiltration. Mission accomplished? Sai asked calmly, though beads of sweat glistened on his forehead. Shiori nodded. We destroyed most of their supplies. Freed some captives. But we're outnumbered now. Let's go. They fled into the forest, ducking under branches and jumping over rocky outcroppings. Enemy pursuit was fierce, but the Leaf team had the advantage of speed and a head start. Adrenaline pounded in Naruto's veins. He pushed forward, ignoring the trembling in his muscles. This was his first real mission using those devil fruit-like abilities. And he had done it. He'd rescued civilians, held his own without losing control. The sense of accomplishment warred with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. Forest camp. Late night several miles away, the team finally halted in a small clearing. A makeshift campfire flickered, illuminating tired faces. They'd lost the pursuing enemies, for now. The rescued captives, those who could walk, sat around, grateful but shaken. Yugo counted heads, confirming everyone was present. We'll rest here for a few hours, then move again at first light. Good job, everyone. Naruto plopped onto a fallen log, wiping sweat from his forehead. His head buzzed, arms still shaking from the repeated use of his powers. Shiori offered him a canteen of water, which he drank greedily. She studied him curiously. That was quite a display. I've never seen jutsu like yours. He tried a grin. Neither have I. Yugo approached, her tone softer than usual. I'll report to Hokage-sama that your contribution was invaluable. We might have lost more people without your unique skills. Naruto felt a stir of satisfaction. Thanks. I'm just glad we saved those civilians. Sai remained quiet, his unreadable gaze lingering on Naruto. Possibly he was evaluating how this new variable would fit into the shinobi world. For now, though, no one pressed Naruto for more details, and he was too exhausted to elaborate. Yugo looked around. Everyone, get some rest. We move out at dawn. Naruto slumped against the log, letting the tension ease from his shoulders. Weariness and pride intertwined. Perhaps he had proven something to the squad, to himself, and maybe even to Minato. The question now was what came next. He stared at the star-filled sky. The day had been long, dangerous, and strangely rewarding. His powers, for all their unpredictability, had made a difference. He hadn't turned into some rampaging monster. A small smile tugged at his lips as he recalled Ino's and Hinata's worried faces, their kisses, their promises of support. He could handle this. He would handle this. And if the council or Danzo or even foreign enemies came at him, he'd be ready. No longer would he be the forgotten son. Eventually, he drifted into a shallow sleep, lulled by the crackle of the fire and the soft murmurs of relieved captives. Outside the glow of the flames, the silent forest loomed, a reminder that threats still lurked beyond the trees. But for now, Naruto's mind settled on a single thought. He was done being overlooked, done being powerless. The world would learn just how far he could rise no matter the cost. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Forest Camp. Pre-dawn. A chill clung to the darkness as Naruto stirred awake near the dying embers of the campfire. The recon squad and their rescued civilians remained huddled in this small clearing, concealed by thick brush and towering pines. Nearby, Yugo stood watch, her silhouette outlined against the faint glow of dawn. Sai and Shiori slept on the other side, while Riku polished a short blade, eyes scanning for threats. Naruto pushed himself upright. Despite his fatigue, an unrelenting buzz of power thrummed in his veins. The events of the previous day played through his mind. The infiltration, the rescue, the chaotic bursts of devil fruit-like abilities he'd unleashed. He wondered if he'd truly proven himself or if the mission was just a step toward a larger confrontation. Yugo's voice carried softly. We'll move out soon, Naruto. You should eat something. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, nodding. Got it. Behind him, a couple of the rescued civilians stirred, managing weak smiles of gratitude. One older merchant, bandaged from a minor wound, approached shakily. Thank you again, young shinobi. If you hadn't come, we'd be. Naruto raised a hand. No need to thank me, just focus on getting home safely. The merchant gave a trembling bow before shooing his companions. A flicker of pride warmed Naruto's chest. For so long, he had been the outcast, the overshadowed son. But these people looked at him like a genuine hero. It felt right. A gentle rustling signaled Sai's approach. He offered Naruto a small ration pack. "We leave in 10 minutes, he said in his measured tone. "The mission's nearly done, but enemies may still be patrolling the area." Naruto accepted the rations. "Good. The sooner we get these people back, the better." Sai studied Naruto with a cool, calculating gaze. "You fought impressively, but your powers, are they stable?" Naruto stiffened. Memories of brief dizziness during battle flashing through his mind. They held up fine. A beat of silence. "I see." Sai didn't pry further. He turned away, leaving Naruto alone with his thoughts. Before the day even began, Naruto felt that swirl of uncertainty in his gut again. Logia-like transformations. Paramecia-like shockwaves. Bizarre gravitational pulls. He still had no name for the chaotic cluster of abilities inside him. But he couldn't deny they were growing stronger, or that the weird feedback after each power taxed his body. Shaking off the worry, Naruto focused on the bigger picture. The mission was nearly complete, and soon he'd return to Konoha as more than just the problem child. Konoha gates. Afternoon. A hush of relief washed over the villagers when the recon squad marched through the gates, the rescued civilians in tow. Injured but alive, the merchants and travelers were quickly guided to the hospital wing. A crowd of shinobi and curious onlookers gathered, chattering with surprise at the successful rescue. Naruto felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Suspicion, curiosity, maybe even a hint of admiration. Everyone had an opinion. He straightened his spine, ignoring the low murmur of voices. Yugo approached, speaking quietly. "Report to the Hokage immediately. He wants a debrief." Naruto nodded. The rest of the squad dispersed, each heading for medical checkups or personal errands. He followed Yugo up the main road toward the Hokage Tower. The attention was impossible to miss. Some villagers stared unabashedly, whispering things like, "That's him, the one with the strange powers," while a few braver souls openly thanked him for saving the captured civilians. Naruto offered a small nod in return, more than a little overwhelmed by the conflicting sentiments. He felt a light tug on his sleeve. Turning, he saw a teenage girl, one of the hostages, looking up at him with trembling gratitude. You saved my father. Thank you." Naruto was momentarily speechless. "I'm glad you both made it." She bowed deeply, tears in her eyes, then hurried to catch up with the medics escorting her family. It struck him that, for the first time, villagers were praising him for something substantial, not overshadowing him with Nanami's name or treating him like a ticking bomb. The feeling was surreal. Hokage's office. Shortly after, Minato greeted Naruto with a mixture of relief and caution. He stood behind his wide desk, arms folded. Papers lay scattered: battle reports, mission logs, council complaints. Kushina sat in one corner, wearing a look that alternated between pride and worry. Yugo gave a concise debrief. The successful infiltration, the rescue of civilians, the sabotage of enemy supplies. When she described how Naruto used his strange abilities to free hostages and hold off multiple attackers, Minato's lips pressed together in a tight line, equal parts impressed and anxious. "Well done," Minato said after Yugo finished. "You exceeded expectations, Naruto." Naruto nodded. "I'm just glad we got them out. But those rogue shinobi, any idea who they were?" Minato shook his head, brow creasing. "We've found no clear affiliation. Some intelligence points to rogue factions from smaller nations trying to destabilize Fire Country roots. Others believe outside powers may be funding them." Kushina frowned. "They had a strong grip on the region. We'll need more patrols, possibly more infiltration." Yugo bowed. "If there's another operation, I'd be willing to lead it again." Minato offered a grateful smile. "Your performance was exemplary. You're dismissed for now. Rest and stay on standby." Yugo exited, leaving Naruto with his parents. An awkward silence lingered until Kushina stood and placed a hand gently on Naruto's shoulder. "We're proud of you," she said, voice quiet, but also worried. "You're pushing yourself hard." Naruto forced a crooked grin. "I can handle it. It's better than sitting around while everyone else fights." Minato sighed, glancing at him with paternal concern. "Your abilities, did you feel any instability during combat?" "I managed," Naruto answered evasively. "There's a strain, but I'll adapt." Kushina's expression spoke of unresolved anxiety. Just don't push too far, okay? We don't want you tearing yourself apart. Naruto softened, seeing genuine care in her eyes. I'll be careful, he promised. Minato exhaled, as though releasing a heavy weight. All right. Take some days off. But be prepared, Danzo and the council will certainly have things to say about your performance. Naruto tensed. He'd nearly forgotten that every success could double as ammunition for Danzo's plans. Great, he muttered. Kushina, seeing his grimace, tried to smile encouragingly. One step at a time, Naruto. You've proven you're an asset. Maybe this will lessen the council's fears. He doubted that, but nodded all the same. I'll keep my eyes open. Danzo's secret meeting. Late afternoon shadow draped the hidden corridors beneath Konoha. Torches flickered along stone walls, casting dancing light on a lone figure's bandaged face. Danzo stood in a small chamber, speaking quietly with two rude operatives. He displayed significant capabilities, Danzo said, his tone devoid of emotion. Logia-like transformations, intangible movement, high-impact shockwaves. Possibly more that we haven't seen. A masked operative asked, should we attempt retrieval or containment? Danzo's single visible eye narrowed. Not yet. He's under the Hokage's protection, and the villagers are rallying behind him after that rescue. He paused, considering. No, we bide our time. For now, watch him. Let him prove himself further. Once the moment is right, we'll act. The operatives bowed. Danzo motioned for them to depart, his gaze cold and calculating. Power of this magnitude, unaligned with any known bloodline, if harnessed, it could elevate Konoha's might. Or if uncontrollable, it could threaten the entire village. Danzo intended to ensure that ultimate power fell under his jurisdiction, one way or another. Naruto's apartment. Evening. Naruto collapsed onto his couch, a wave of exhaustion hitting him. He'd barely closed his eyes when a familiar knock sounded. Pushing himself upright, he opened the door to find Ino and Hinata standing there. Both wore anxious expressions. Without waiting for an invitation, Ino slipped inside, followed by Hinata. Ino tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder. We heard you're back. Are you okay? Did they treat you all right? Naruto gave a faint grin. I'm in one piece. Mission went smoothly, all things considered. Hinata stepped closer, eyes scanning him for injuries. Why, you look tired. Are you hurt at all? He shook his head. Just drained. Using my powers so intensively wiped me out. Ino snorted softly. No wonder, after what we heard, fighting an entire rogue camp practically by yourself. Naruto started to protest that the rest of the team did plenty, but he could see the spark of pride in Ino's eyes, so he let it pass. Let's just say, I surprised even myself. They settled in, the two of them fussing over Naruto's bruises and fatigue. While he found it a bit embarrassing, he couldn't deny the warmth spread in our concern. In a life so defined by neglect and harsh judgments, having them here fretting over him, celebrating his small victories felt surreal. Ino leaned closer, pressing a palm to his forehead as if checking for fever. You're not burning up or anything. He blinked. I'm fine, really. She gave a playful huff. Well, if you ever scare me like that again, I'm sending you hospital flowers with a note that says, I told you so. Naruto laughed quietly. Fair enough. Hinata's cheeks were dusted pink. She hovered nearby, unsure if she should be as forward as Ino. Her gaze flicked from Naruto's face to the small cut on his forearm. May I see that wound? He offered his arm, watching Hinata's gentle focus as she used a bit of medical ninjutsu to heal the shallow slice. He couldn't stop his heart from stuttering at the tender brush of her chakra. Thanks, he said softly. She met his eyes, a shy smile tugging at her lips. I'm happy to help. Ino smirked. Don't hog him too long, she teased, leaning in to brush her lips against Naruto's cheek. He might need healing in other places. Hinata blushed furiously but didn't step away, clearly torn between embarrassment and a longing to be close. Naruto watched them both, uncertain how to handle the swirl of affection. Yet it felt natural, like they were forging a fragile new normal. Listen, Naruto said, clearing his throat. There's something I need to tell you too. They both turned attentive expressions his way. The mission was a success, but Danzo's not going to sit still. He'll be after me again, maybe in more subtle ways. I just want you to be careful, in case he or his root agents think about using you as leverage. Ino's features hardened. He'd better not try. I won't be manipulated by some old warhawk. Hinata nodded, though anxiety flickered in her eyes. I'll stay alert. You won't have to worry about me. Naruto felt a swell of gratitude. Thanks. They exchanged hushed words late into the evening. Talk of training, the mission, the potential future arcs in Konoha's political landscape. All the while, the tension between them ebbed and flowed, a mix of emotional closeness and the tantalizing draw of physical attraction. Eventually, the conversation slowed. Ino and Hinata both seemed reluctant to leave. Ino stretched her arms above her head. It's getting late. Maybe we should. Naruto inhaled, heart-pounding with an unfamiliar boldness. Stay, he said quietly, glancing between them. Hinata blinked, cheeks warming. Are you sure? Ino lifted a brow, a slow smile forming. I'm not complaining, but are you up for it, Mr. Exhausted Hero? He managed a small chuckle. I'm tired, but not dead. Just, let's not be alone tonight, if that's okay. They both moved closer, Hinata perching beside him on the couch, Ino settling on his other side. Their presence felt comforting, a shield against the swirling outside pressures. In a soft hush of shared vulnerability, the three stayed together. Occasional quiet laughter, a fleeting kiss here or there. Nothing too rushed, just the slow burn of intimacy, the reassurance that whatever storms lay ahead, they could face them together. Hokage's conference hall. Next morning, soft sunlight bathed the large table where Minato sat with several council elders. Danzo was present, of course, along with Homura and Kaharu. Despite the rescue mission's success, tension was palpable. Minato addressed them in a calm but firm tone. Our patrols confirm a partial retreat from the rogue faction. The immediate threat is contained, though we remain vigilant. Homura folded his arms. Then the matter of Naruto's involvement should be discussed. He deployed abilities that none of us have seen before. Kaharu nodded. Such power, if not adequately monitored, could be catastrophic. Minato's expression remained steady. Naruto followed orders. He freed civilian captives and supported the squad's success. He demonstrated restraint. Danzo cleared his throat. Perhaps. Yet his powers continue to evolve. This council must decide if we allow this phenomenon to proceed unchecked or implement measures to ensure it doesn't spiral out of control. A flicker of frustration crossed Minato's face. He is my son and a shinobi of this village. We will treat him as such. The word, son, hung heavily in the air, a reminder that Naruto was no ordinary subordinate. Danzo pressed on. Then as his father and Hokage, I trust you will keep him in check. Should he fail to maintain control, the consequences must be faced swiftly. An uneasy hush fell. Minato exhaled slowly, unwilling to ignite the situation further. We will proceed with caution. This council meeting is adjourned. The elders left, Danzo giving one last scrutinizing glance. Once they were gone, Minato leaned back in his chair, massaging the bridge of his nose. He could only imagine how Naruto would react to being spoken of like a threat. But they were playing a dangerous game of politics. Akatsuki interlude. Unknown location. A cave echoed with dripping water, lit only by faint torchlight. Two robed figures stood near a large boulder. One wore a swirling mask, the other had distinctive ringed eyes. The masked figure spoke, voice low. Reports confirm unusual chakra phenomena in Konoha, some boy demonstrating abilities that defy standard shinobi logic. The ring-eyed man nodded. I am aware. Pain has encountered no such power in the past. This is intriguing. So what do we do? The masked one asked, calm and calculating. Make contact, try to capture him. A pause. The ring-eyed man's expression was unreadable. We keep watch for now. If his power grows, it may serve our cause or threaten it. Either way, we cannot ignore him forever. Their voices echoed, blending with the murmur of distant water. Far from Konoha, a new threat had begun to stir, eyes turning toward Naruto's unexplainable might. Naruto's apartment. Late morning. After the intense evening of emotional closeness, Naruto had expected to wake with either Ino or Hinata by his side. Instead, he found a note. Ino had to help her parents in the flower shop. Hinata had early training with her clan. Each left a quick reassurance that they'd visit again soon. He read the notes with a faint smile. Guess they let me sleep in, he muttered, rolling off the bed. Stretching, he felt a mild ache in his limbs. No surprise there, he'd nearly tapped out his reserves on that mission. A loud knock on the door jolted him. Checking quickly through the peephole, he was mildly surprised to see a purple-haired kunoichi leaning against the hallway wall. Anko. He opened up. Anko? What brings you here? She smirked. Heard the big hero was back in town. Decided to drop by and see what all the fuss was about. Mind if I come in? He stepped aside. Sure. Anko sauntered in, hands on her hips. Her gaze darted around the cluttered apartment's small space, unmade bed, faint smell of fresh flowers from Ino's lingering presence. She let out a low whistle. So this is the lair of Konoha's newest powerhouse, huh? Naruto shrugged. Nothing special. Want some tea or something? She waved a dismissive hand. Nah. I won't stay long. Just wanted to see if you'd be up for a little sparring session. I'm bored out of my mind. He paused. Spar? You sure you want that? My powers can get out of control. Her lips curved into a daring grin. Exactly. I like things hot and unpredictable. Naruto found himself chuckling. All right, if you insist, but don't blame me if it gets messy. She raised a brow, eyes gleaming with mischief. I can handle a little mess. Training Ground 44 midday, often referred to as the Forest of Death, Training Ground 44 was usually reserved for high-stakes exercises. Anko, having proctored the Chunin exams in this area before, had access. After a bit of cajoling, sheet keepers to let them in on a private spar. Towering trees, thick vines, and an ominous hush defined this territory. Perfect for a no-holds-barred test of skill away from prying eyes. They squared off in a small clearing. Anko tossed a kunai from hand to hand with a feral grin. Don't hold back on me. I'm no academy flunky. Naruto smirked, letting that roiling energy respond. You might regret saying that. She laughed. Bring it, hotshot. They launched into a furious dance. Anko's style was fluid but aggressive, slithering around him with serpentine grace, forcing him to stay on his toes. She tested him with short-range weapons, low kicks, and the occasional hidden snake jutsu. Naruto retaliated with bursts of devil fruit-like powers. Stretching arms to catch her off guard, intangible phases to dodge a strike, shockwave punches that rattled the ground. Trees shuddered under the force of their collision. Leaves rained down. Animals scattered, alarmed by the commotion. Anko's laughter rang out between each exchange. This is insane, she shouted, ducking a rubber-extended punch. No wonder half the village is freaking out about you. Naruto felt sweat bead on his forehead. Despite his powers, she was no pushover. She'd seen enough weird jutsu in her time to adapt quickly. He decided to try something new. A swirl of black smoke gathered around his fists. He poured the intangible gravity-like energy into it, imagining pulling her forward. Anko staggered as if tugged by an invisible hand. Her eyes widened. What the? Naruto capitalized, lunging for a finishing blow. But in a flash, she substituted with a snake clone, leaving him punching empty air. The next second, she was behind him, kunai pressed lightly at his neck. He froze, heart pounding. Cheap shot, he muttered. She leaned in, breath grazing his ear. All's fair in a spar. Surrender? The black aura crackled around him, and to Anko's amazement, it pulled the kunai from her hand. He twisted around, pinning her wrist. Their faces ended up inches apart, both breathing heavily. For a moment, they stayed like that, raw energy crackling between them. Then, in a burst of impulsive aggression, Anko gripped Naruto's collar and crushed her mouth to his, the same ferocity she brought to combat blazing in the contact. Naruto's eyes widened, but he didn't push her away. The tension from their spar erupted into a heated kiss, a clash of adrenaline and curiosity. When they broke apart, both were panting, faces flushed. Anko's smirk returned. Guess you can keep up after all. Naruto stared at her, still reeling from the sudden turn. Okay, that was. She shrugged off the moment, though a satisfied gleam lingered in her eyes. Don't overthink it. I just like it when I find someone who can match me blow for blow. Plus, you're kinda cute. He realized, with a startled jolt, that he was flush against Anko's body, her arms draped around his neck. A wave of guilt and excitement washed over him. He was juggling so many relationships already. But she radiated an undeniable allure. He managed. This is complicated. She pulled back slightly. Don't worry, hero boy. I'm not asking you to marry me. Her gaze flicked downward. But if you want another round of sparring or anything else, I'm around. A stunned silence. Naruto exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You're something else, he murmured. Anko winked. You have no idea. Konoha Main Street, late afternoon. After parting ways with Anko, Naruto navigated the crowded Main Street with a head full of conflicted thoughts. The spar had been exhilarating proof that he was growing more confident in using his powers. But the intense kiss that followed left him rattled in more ways than one. He didn't regret it exactly, but how would Ino and Hinata react if they found out? Then again, his relationships were already unorthodox, and he wasn't shy about physical affection nor, apparently, were the women who gravitated around him. There was a certain freedom in it, even if it promised complications. Still, the bigger picture loomed. Danzo's looming threat, the council's wariness, the possibility of more attacks on the village. He needed to stay focused. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Naruto. He turned to see Nanami jogging toward him, her expression relieved. I've been looking all over for you. He slowed his pace. What's up? She caught her breath. Dad wanted me to tell you there's a briefing tomorrow about the rogue faction. You need to be there. And, I wanted to see how you're doing. He shrugged, ignoring the swirl of guilt over not seeing his sister more often. I'm fine. Just training. She studied him intently. I heard about your mission. You saved a lot of people. Everyone's talking about it. He scratched the back of his neck. Well, not everyone's thrilled. The council's probably cooking up new ways to keep tabs on me. Nanami hesitated, biting her lower lip. I'm sorry. I wish I could help more. Naruto's chest tightened. Despite everything, she was still his sister, still the bright star. He forced a tight smile. You're doing enough. Just keep being the golden child they want. She shook her head, eyes watering slightly. I don't want you to see me that way. You're important, too. For a moment, the siblings stood in the bustling street, a bubble of tense emotion surrounding them. Finally, Naruto sighed. Come on, let's walk. They strolled together, weaving through the throng of villagers. Some recognized them Minato's children, the shining prodigy and the so-called anomaly whispering as they passed. Nanami cast anxious looks at Naruto, but he pretended not to hear the gossip. Eventually, they stopped by a quiet overlook where the village rooftops sprawled below. Nanami leaned against the railing. Remember when we used to sit up here as kids, waiting for Dad to come home from missions? Naruto nodded, memories flickering of simpler times before he truly noticed how the village adored Nanami and overlooked him. Yeah, seems like a lifetime ago. She hugged her arms to her chest. Naruto, I know you resent the favoritism. I never asked for it, and I hate that it's driven a wedge between us. He listened, the wind catching stray strands of their shared blonde-red hair. Slowly, he touched her shoulder. It's not your fault. I just got tired of being invisible. Now I have these powers, and everyone's either scared or wants to use me. Nanami's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. I don't want to lose you. A pang struck Naruto's heart. Despite their complicated relationship, he still loved his sister. You won't, he promised, voice gentler than he expected. I'm not going anywhere. She managed a small, shaky smile. Then she took a breath, regaining composure. Dad expects us both at the briefing tomorrow. Don't be late. Naruto smirked wryly. Who do you think I am? They parted ways, tension lingering in the air, but it felt slightly less suffocating than before. Maybe that was enough for now. Naruto's apartment. Night darkness had settled by the time Naruto returned home. The lamp in the living area glowed softly, illuminating Ino's silhouette. She sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through a magazine. At the sight of him, she set it aside. Finally, she said, relief evident in her tone. Where were you? He entered, stripping off his jacket. Long day training, errands, ran into my sister. Ino eyed him with subtle suspicion. Anything interesting happen in that training? Naruto thought of Anko's smirk and the surprising turn of their spar. He hesitated, not sure how much he should divulge. Ino's sharp gaze caught the flicker of guilt or excitement in his eyes. She narrowed her eyes. Spill it, mister. He cleared his throat. Anko wanted to spar. It got intense. Ino's lip curled sneer. By intense, do we mean? He shrugged, feeling a twinge of heat in his cheeks. We kissed. Her eyes flashed with a mix of annoyance, curiosity, and maybe a hint of possessiveness. That woman is shameless, she muttered, though a small smirk tugged her lips. Let me guess, you didn't exactly resist? Naruto exhaled. Look, it just happened. I'm not trying to hide anything from you or Hinata. Ino crossed her arms. You really are collecting quite the harem, huh? He frowned. It's not like I planned it. This just keeps happening. To his surprise, Ino burst out laughing. Naruto, you're unbelievable. She rose, stepping closer. But don't think you can brush me off. I'm not letting some older kunoichi steal all the fun. She grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him into a fierce kiss. It seared away his retort, and for a moment, all that existed was the heady, insistent press of her lips. The adrenaline from earlier fights flared again, manifesting as a raw, consuming hunger. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Ino's gaze burned. Understand? He swallowed, heart pounding. Yeah, he managed, voice hoarse. She traced her fingertips along his jawline, her earlier teasing replaced by a more serious intensity. I'm not going to pretend I'm cool with you kissing half the village. But I knew what I was getting into. Just promise you won't forget who was here first. A rush of complicated relief and guilt mingled. He nodded slowly. I won't. She let out a sigh, tension easing from her shoulders. Good. Now, do you need me to stay tonight, or do you want space? You look wiped. He hesitated, part of him craving companionship. Another part was too drained to think straight. Stay, he said, voice subdued. But just stay. Ino nodded, brushing hair from her eyes. All right. Let's not push anything. We can just be. They settled on the couch. Ino curled into him, and Naruto slung an arm around her. The day's chaos slipped away as they found a pocket of calm. In that silence, he reflected on how drastically his life had shifted, once starved for recognition, now juggling dangerous powers and an equally perilous web of romantic connections. Eventually, they drifted into a half-sleep, her warmth steady against his side. For a few precious hours, Naruto let himself forget about Danzo, about secret threats, about the upcoming briefing. He just wanted to hold on to something that felt real and supportive. Briefing room. Next morning the air in the small briefing hall felt heavy with unspoken tension. Minato, Kushina, Nanami, and Naruto gathered at the front alongside Shikamaru, who had been summoned for strategic input. A few jonin, including Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma, filled the other seats. The overall mood was somber, shaped by the knowledge that the rogue faction was only part of a bigger problem. Minato began, voice grave. We've confirmed that the attackers who ambushed the caravan were part of a larger network operating across multiple borders. Their motives remain unclear, but we suspect they're collaborating with mercenaries, possibly funded by an unknown sponsor. Shikamaru rubbed his chin. We've analyzed the patterns of attacks. They target supply lines at strategic choke points, likely aiming to destabilize the Land of Fire's economy and defenses. Naruto listened intently, glancing at Nanami to see her reaction. She looked focused, occasionally jotting notes on a small scroll. Minato continued, we must remain vigilant. Any shinobi available for border patrol or infiltration will be assigned in rotations. Nanami, you'll assist with sealing techniques to protect vulnerable checkpoints. Naruto felt the eyes of the room shift to him. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed with curiosity. Kurenai's expression was cautiously neutral. Asuma blew out a puff of smoke, thoughtful. Minato's tone was measured. You're to remain on standby as an emergency response unit. If these mercenaries break through a checkpoint or threaten any critical route, you'll be deployed with a small team. Naruto gave a short nod, half expecting more pushback. But apparently, his successful rescue mission had earned him a tentative new role. Kushina tapped the table. We can't afford to stretch our forces too thin. Let's work smarter, not harder. Shikamaru will coordinate the strategies. Stay in contact with intelligence networks from neighboring lands, some of them owe Konoha a favor. Shikamaru rolled his eyes as if this was all far too troublesome, but he nodded. Understood. Minato raked his gaze over the group. Any questions? A hush followed. None spoke, though tension crackled. The briefing ended, shinobi filing out to begin preparations. Naruto lingered, glancing at his father. Minato gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that they'd talk later. Nanami caught Naruto's elbow as they stepped into the corridor. I'll be out in the field with sealing squads for the next week or two. Take care, Naruto said. These mercenaries aren't pushovers. She tried to smile. Same to you, big brother, don't do anything stupid. He snorted. Can't promise that. Danzo's encounter, Hokage Tower corridor. As Naruto exited the briefing, he nearly collided with Danzo, who stood just outside the room. The older man studied Naruto with a critical eye, hands resting on his cane. Lord Danzo, Naruto greeted coolly, stepping around to pass by. Danzo's voice stopped him. Your performance against those rogues was impressive. You've garnered a few admirers in the village. Naruto turned, jaw tight. Is that so? Danzo's bandaged face betrayed no emotion. I warn you not to grow complacent. Power untempered by discipline can lead to tragedy. Naruto's eyes flashed. I'm not your puppet, Danzo, and my father trusts me enough to use my power responsibly. A slight sneer touched Danzo's lips. We shall see how long that lasts. Sometimes, the most dangerous threat to a village is the hubris of one who believes they are above consequence. Naruto forced himself to remain calm, the swirl of devil fruit energy prickling under his skin. I don't see it that way. If I can protect Konoha, then that's all there is to it. Danzo's grip tightened on his cane, but he simply stepped aside. Mind your steps. The world is not as forgiving as your father. With that, he walked away, cloak trailing behind him. Naruto exhaled, feeling the tension coil in his gut. Danzo was definitely plotting something. Naruto's newfound success had only emboldened him to keep pressing. Naruto's apartment. Late afternoon. Naruto's door creaked open to reveal Hinata, timid as ever, holding a small container of homemade onigiri. She offered a soft smile. I heard you were at a briefing. I thought you might be hungry. He ushered her inside, touched by the gesture. You didn't have to do that, thanks. She placed the container on his small table, cheeks pink. It's the least I can do, with everything that's happening. He sat down, gratefully picking up an onigiri. This is great. Thank you. She watched him eat, a trace of contentment in her eyes. After he finished a couple bites, Hinata cleared her throat. Naruto-kun, I know you have other relationships going on. And I accept that. But I still worry. Sometimes, I feel like there's so much going on around you politically, emotionally that I can't keep up. He leaned forward, taking her hand gently. I won't lie. Things are complicated, but I don't want you to feel left out, if it ever gets too much. She shook her head. No, I want to stand by your side, no matter how chaotic. A quiet determination flickered in her pale eyes. Naruto squeezed her hand, warmth blossoming in his chest. You've always been there, Hinata. Even when no one else was. She blushed. You inspire me. He pulled her closer, to her forehead. Her eyes fluttered shut, relief and affection radiating. He wanted to reassure her fully, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he enveloped her in a tender embrace, letting her rest against his chest. They stayed like that, calm and steady, until a loud knock rattled the door again. Startled, Hinata jumped back, face flushing. Naruto rose, opening the door to find Shikamaru, looking mildly annoyed. Shikamaru's gaze flicked between Naruto and a clearly flustered Hinata. Am I interrupting something? Naruto stepped aside. Just come in. Shikamaru stuffed his hands in his pockets, eyes drifting around the apartment. I have some intel updates from my father. Figured I'd pass it on personally. Naruto gestured for him to sit. All right, let's hear it. Hinata, regaining composure, politely excused herself. I should go, training with my clan soon. Thank you again for enjoying the onigiri, Naruto-kun. He nodded, stepping aside so she could slip past. She flashed a small smile at Shikamaru, who returned it with a polite nod, then left. Once the door shut, Shikamaru exhaled. You really do have a full dance card these days. Naruto frowned. Not now, Shikamaru. What's the intel? Shikamaru dropped onto the couch, crossing an ankle over his knee. Fine. Word from the Nara network suggests these rogue groups have been funneling captured goods and possibly people to unknown buyers. Some are rumored to specialize in advanced weaponry, maybe even forbidden jutsu. This is bigger than we thought. Naruto's brow furrowed. And the Hokage wants me to be on standby in case they move again? Exactly. We suspect they'll ramp up attacks once they realize we know their supply routes. Also, there's a chance that certain high-level criminals, maybe even the Akatsuki, are paying attention to all this chaos. Naruto's posture tensed. Great. Another layer of insanity. Shikamaru nodded. We need to keep an eye on everything. The council is worried, the clans are edgy, and your name keeps coming up in strategic discussions. Some see you as a wildcard. Naruto sighed, glancing at the faint black swirl along his forearm, a remnant of the intangible powers. I'm not out to prove anything to them anymore. A flicker of empathy crossed Shikamaru's face. Yeah, but this is your new normal. Try not to let it crush you. Naruto snorted. I'll manage. They talked strategy for another half-hour, hashing out possible responses to future rogue attacks. As Shikamaru left, Naruto couldn't shake the sense that war clouds were gathering in the distance, both outside Konoha and within its political corridors. Training Field 17 Twilight. Naruto needed an outlet for the tension building inside him. He found himself at the familiar training ground, alone this time. Sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and purples. A breeze rustled the grass. He focused, letting the swirl of powers come forward. Stretching arms, shockwave fists, intangible phasing, gravitational pulls. Each technique drained a portion of him, yet each also felt more controlled, more fluid than before. He paused, panting. Closing his eyes, he reached deeper. The roiling ocean inside him shifted, each devil fruit-like ability overlapping. He attempted to combine them for a single technique, perhaps a shockwave, while intangible. But the moment he tried, a violent clash of energies surged, sending him staggering. Damn it, he hissed. A splitting pain radiated through his skull, the feedback of incompatible forces. He sank to one knee, breath ragged. As he tried to stand, a presence flickered in the corner of his vision. He spun around, raising a trembling fist, only to see Kakashi perched on a low branch, reading his small orange book. Kakashi closed the book with one hand, eyes smiling. You all right there, Naruto? Naruto swallowed, forcing down the ache. Yeah, just testing some limits. Kakashi hopped down gracefully. I've seen enough jutsu to recognize when someone's out of chakra sync. Yours is different. Combining them like that seems risky. Naruto managed a humorless laugh. Everything about me is risky these days. Kakashi studied him, seeming to weigh his words carefully. We've never been close, but I've watched you from a distance. You're making waves, kid, and not all of them good, but I also respect your drive. Naruto wiped sweat from his brow. Thanks, I guess. Kakashi's tone softened. I know what it's like to carry burdens that set you apart. If you ever want pointers on controlling multiple energies, or even just advice about this crazy shinobi life, I'm around. Naruto's hardened expression eased. I appreciate it. Honestly, I might take you up on that. Kakashi nodded. Then take care, Naruto. Don't let your ambition consume you. He turned to leave, pausing only to add, oh, and watch out for Danzo. He's always got hidden agendas. Naruto snorted. That's the only thing I'm sure of. With a final wave, Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves, leaving Naruto alone in the twilight once more. He stared at the spot where the Jonin had stood, a strange mixture of gratitude and caution filling him. Even Kakashi, an elite shinobi, seemed concerned about the unstoppable friction building up around Naruto's life. Stargazing, night later, under a canopy of stars, Naruto lay on his back in the training field, arms folded behind his head. He could still sense the lingering twinges of pain from pushing his powers earlier. But a quiet calm settled over him now that he'd stopped training. Footsteps rustled the grass. Ino appeared, silver moonlight highlighting her hair. She approached wordlessly, sinking down beside him, her gaze lifted to the stars. After a moment, she slipped her hand into his, fingers intertwining. They lay there, silent, the vast expanse of sky above them. Finally, she spoke softly. You're always here when you're troubled. Naruto chuckled under his breath. Guess you know me well. She squeezed his hand. I might have been asking around. Kakashi said you were pushing yourself again. He closed his eyes, inhaling the night air. Just trying to keep up with everything. Ino rolled onto her side, propping her head on her arm. Her eyes searched his face. You've got a lot on your plate. But you're not alone. Hinata, me, even that crazy Anko, we care about you. Her words stirred something deep in his chest. You're all risking so much by being close to me. Danzo could. She placed a finger over his lips, cutting him off. I'm Ekunoichi. I know the risks, we all do. He held her gaze, a quiet gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Ino. She leaned down, capturing his lips in a slow, tender kiss under the moonlight. This time, there was no urgent hunger, no fleeting rush of adrenaline, only a soft promise of understanding and devotion. He responded, letting the tension melt away as they shared that gentle intimacy, the world fading to a hush around them. When they parted, she settled her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Don't break yourself, Naruto. We need you in one piece. He stroked her hair, exhaling a long, peaceful breath. I promise I'll do my best. And so they remained, pressed together under the star-filled sky. Beyond the calm, storms still brewed rogue factions, council politics, Danzo's schemes, and even the Akatsuki's interest in Naruto's strange powers. But for this moment, in the hush of the night, Naruto allowed himself to hope. He allowed himself to believe that, despite the betrayals and the neglect, he'd found a path worth fighting for, and people worth protecting. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Forest clearing near Konoha, pre-dawn. A single hawk cried overhead as Naruto stood in the clearing, tension rippling through his body. The early sky was dark, clouds blotting out the first hints of dawn. He had come here for solitude, a final check on the roiling energy which had intensified since the rescue mission. But each new triumph only deepened the fracture between him and Konoha's uneasy leadership. Shikamaru's intel suggested that the rogue faction and possibly other lurking forces was preparing for something far more coordinated. But the council had not convened him for any new assignments yet. Instead, Danzo's route had been quietly amassing intelligence on him. The village was at a boiling point, and Naruto felt certain it was all about to erupt. He raised his palm toward a stout tree, forcing a swirl of intangible gravity-like force to stir. A subtle black haze shimmered around his fingertips, pulling leaves and broken branches toward him before he released them. As usual, the strain throbbed in his head, reminding him how precarious it was to juggle so many powers. He had no name for these abilities, no single identity for what he was becoming. A twig snapped behind him. He spun, chest seizing with reflexive tension, only to see Hinata step out from the mist. She lifted her hands in a gentle, non-threatening gesture. Sorry, she murmured, stepping closer. I saw you leave so early. I guessed you might be here. His taut posture eased. You're getting good at tracking me, didn't hear you at all. She offered a slight smile, though worry shadowed her pale eyes. Are you still pushing yourself to the limit? He ran a hand through his hair. Feels like I don't have a choice. Something big is brewing, Hinata. I can feel it. She cast her gaze across the clearing, noticing the bent trunks, the fallen leaves sucked inward by his gravity-like technique. You're a part of something, so much larger now. Just promise me, if you sense danger, you'll call for help. He gave her a lopsided grin. You know me, I'm not big on asking for help. She moved close enough that their shoulders touched, a gentle warmth bridging the space between them. Then at least let me be here to stand beside you. A flutter ran through Naruto's chest. He lifted a hand to brush a strand of her hair aside. You've always been braver than you think. She blushed, leaning into him slightly, only because of you. Before their moment could deepen, an urgent voice echoed through the clearing. Naruto. Hinata. They turned to see Kiba, panting from a hurried run, Akamaru at his heels. The dog barked once, snout pointed in their direction. Kiba? Naruto asked, stepping away from Hinata, concern knotting his brow. What's wrong? Kiba caught his breath. Trouble, real trouble. The Hokages sent out an alert. Multiple sightings of those rogue mercenaries near the western border. They've attacked a checkpoint. Scouts report they have advanced weaponry we've never seen before. Hinata inhaled sharply. Did they give casualties? Kiba grimaced. Still unconfirmed. Some are missing. Danzo's pushing for an immediate strike force. Naruto tensed. And my father? He's already mobilizing a large contingent. But rumor says the council is demanding you stay behind. Kiba's gaze flicked to Naruto with sympathy. Minato's trying to hold them off, but it's chaos in the tower. Figured you'd want to know before they lock everything down. Naruto's jaw clenched, anger flickering beneath his skin. I saved civilians last time. Why would they keep me on a leash now? Kiba shrugged helplessly. All I know is it's messy. The entire village is up in arms. You'd better get to the Hokage Tower fast. Hinata touched Naruto's arm, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. Go. I'll come with you. Naruto gave a short nod. Without further words, they raced off toward Konoha's center, dread coiling in Naruto's gut. Danzo and the council might finally be making their move to isolate him, and if the rumors about these new weapons were true, the entire village was on the edge of a crisis. Hokage Tower. Early morning, the corridors thundered with commotion. Shinobi hurried in and out, carrying scrolls, dispatch orders, and reports of wounded. A makeshift triage area had sprung up in the adjoining hallway to handle those returning from the border. Tension weighed on every face. Naruto shouldered his way through the crowd, Hinata right behind him. Voices exploded from the main council chamber, audible even before they entered. We cannot risk him going out there again. His power is untested in large-scale warfare. Every minute we wait, more shinobi are dying. Naruto burst into the chamber. Elders turned, some startled, others scowling at his interruption. Danzo stood near one end of the table, flanked by two rude operatives. Homura and Kaharu exchanged wary looks. Minato stood at the head, eyes flaring with frustration, while Kushina hovered protectively at his side. Nanami, too, was present, her fists clenched. All eyes fell on Naruto. Danzo made a tutting sound. Speak of the devil. Minato drew a breath, voice taut. Naruto, we're in the middle of a crisis. The western checkpoint was hit by an organized force. Reports suggest they're using unknown seals and possibly advanced technology. Casualties are rising. Naruto's gaze swept the table. Then let me help. You know I can handle heavy combat. Homura coughed. Yes, but your abilities pose a risk if you lose control. We can't risk mass casualties from friendly fire or... Naruto cut him off, bristling. I'm not about to blast my own allies. Look, you saw how I handled the last infiltration. Danzo stepped in. Yet each time you use those unnatural powers, you bring yourself closer to an unknown tipping point. We have no data on its true nature. For all we know, it could destroy you and us. A wave of anger nearly boiled over in Naruto. I will not stand by while more people die, and I won't let you treat me like some uncontrollable monster. Let me go to the battlefield, or at least give me a squad to lead. Minato raised a hand, tension in every line of his posture. Naruto, I need you to remain calm. Kushina glared at Danzo. This is madness. We can't tie our best weapon's hands behind his back when people are in danger. Danzo's single visible eye flickered at her choice of words. Oh, you've called him a weapon, too. I see we agree on something. Kushina's face twisted with anger, but Minato grasped her arm gently, urging restraint. He turned to Naruto. Son, I'm torn. The council is demanding caution, but I can't deny your potential. The enemy is heavily armed with exotic jutsu. We need every edge. Danzo scoffed. He's more than an edge. He's an anomaly we can't fully control. If you deploy him recklessly, the entire front could. Enough. Naruto's voice reverberated with an almost inhuman intensity, that devil fruit power momentarily trembling the air. The wooden table groaned under an unseen pressure. Gasps rippled among the elders. Silence hung. Even Danzo seemed momentarily taken aback. Naruto inhaled, forcing the roiling energy back under control. Give me the mission. If I fail, you can do whatever you want with me. But I'm not watching from the sidelines. Minato studied his son's determined eyes, then made a decision. Fine. You'll join the reinforcements heading west. Kakashi's squad is en route. You'll link up with them, coordinate infiltration or support as needed. I'll handle the council's fallout. Danzo looked ready to protest, but Minato's glare cut him off. Kushina exhaled in relief, and Nanami offered Naruto a small, tense nod. Don't get yourself killed out there, she murmured. Naruto gave her a tight grin. Same goes for you. Naruto's apartment. Moments later he hadn't expected to return home before heading out, but Hinata insisted he gather a few supplies. She followed him inside, helping collect spare kunai, ration bars, and a cloak. A tightness pressed in Naruto's chest. This might be a longer or bloodier conflict than his last mission. As he fastened his gear pouch, Hiner. Naruto-kun, please, promise you'll come back. He turned, tension softening at the sight of her earnest face. I promise. I won't leave you hanging. Impulsively, he bent down, kissing her slowly, letting the world pause just for that moment. She clung to him, returning the kiss with urgency. When they broke apart, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. A second knock sounded. The door opened and Ino peeked her head in. Her gaze bounced between the two of them in their embrace. Am I interrupting? Naruto sighed, stepping back, heart still hammering. We were just, yeah. Ino slipped in, pressing her lips into a thin line of concern. Kakashi sent me. He wants you at the West Gate in 10 minutes. The squads are assembling. Naruto gathered his remaining gear. Got it. He slung his bag over his shoulder. Ino hesitated, looking from him to Hinata. You're going? He nodded. They need me. She pressed a palm to his chest, searching his eyes. Be careful. If anything goes sideways, I'm coming after you. I don't care what the council says. A flicker of gratitude pulsed through him. He took her hand, squeezing gently. Then, surprising himself, he pulled her into a brief but fiery kiss. The tension in her body melted, replaced by fierce reciprocity. Hinata stood by with a faint blush, but no protest. She understood the complicated bond they all shared. When the kiss ended, Ino's breath came out shaky. You'd better keep that promise. He shouldered the door open, swallowing the surge of conflicting emotions. I will. Konoha's West Gate, shortly after a contingent of shinobi gathered. Kakashi, Asuma, Shikamaru, and a few other familiar faces. Several squads, each with a designated leader. Naruto noticed even Enko leaning against a wall, arms folded, that mischievous smirk on her face when she spotted him. She sidled over, voice low. So they're finally letting you off the leash, huh? He nodded. Feels like it could be a trap, Danzo, the council, but I can't ignore what's happening. She gave his shoulder a playful punch. That's the spirit. Kakashi stepped forward, raising his voice. All right, everyone, listen up. We have confirmed that the rogue faction is approximately 15 kilometers west of the border checkpoint, regrouping in some old fortress ruins. They're fortified with advanced barriers and possibly unique weaponry we haven't seen before. Our orders: neutralize the threat, rescue any hostages, and gather intel on whoever's funding them. Understood? A collective murmur of agreement rose. Shikamaru let out a sigh, stepping up to Naruto. Look, I'm assigned to a different team, but if things get dicey, I'll do what I can to send backup. Naruto managed a half smile. Appreciate it. Let's move, Kakashi said. The squads surged out of the gates, bounding across the landscape in a rapid formation. As Naruto ran, he felt the swirl of power stir in his core. This was no mere infiltration. It could easily become a large-scale clash. Ruined fortress. Late morning crumbling stone walls and collapsed archways dotted the landscape. Once a proud structure, now a skeletal husk. As the Leaf squads approached, muffled booms echoed from behind battered ramparts. Smoke spiraled upward, thick and black. Kakashi gestured for silence. They split into small strike teams, spreading out to surround the fortress's perimeter. Naruto moved with Enko and a couple of Chunin. He peered through a breach in the wall, heart pounding at the scene inside. Roughly 24 enemy shinobi in mismatched gear, some carting crates brimming with cylindrical devices, possibly explosive or specialized weaponry. Others channeled flickering jutsu into large, metallic contraptions that glowed ominously. One of the Chunin whispered, "What the heck is that?" Naruto's gut twisted. No idea, but it doesn't look friendly. Suddenly, an alarm sounded, a harsh blare. Enemy sentries spotted them, and a barrage of kunai peppered the broken wall. Enko snarled, weaving away and launching twin snakes that coiled around one attacker. Kakashi's voice crackled over a short-range comm. All squads, engage. Watch for special weapons. Protect each other. Chaos exploded. Shinobi from both sides clashed among the rubble. Smoke bombs hissed, followed by the flare of jutsu. Naruto ducked a hail of projectiles, then unleashed a rubber extended punch that caught an enemy off guard, sending the man flying. Another foe lunged from behind, but Naruto phased intangible, letting the blade pass through empty air. He re-solidified, delivering a crushing shockwave punch that slammed the attacker into a shattered column. All around him, Konoha shinobi demonstrated their skills. Fire jutsu scorching the ground, water walls blocking stray explosives, coordinated team maneuvers. But the enemy wasn't disorganized. They fired bursts of swirling, mechanical chakra blasts from those metallic contraptions, forcing squads to take cover. Anko whooped, dodging a barrage of glowing bolts. She grinned ferally at Naruto. Now this is a fight. He mustered a smirk, though adrenaline spiked. Let's not get ourselves killed. They dashed deeper into the fortress's central courtyard, where the device-laden crates were stacked. If they could destroy or disable them, Konoha's advantage would skyrocket. Anko darted forward, flinging explosive tags. Naruto channeled the black gravity-like swirl in his palm, yanking the crates closer together. The moment they clustered, Anko's tags ignited, setting off a chain reaction of blasts that rocked the courtyard. Debris flew. Enemy shinobi shouted in panic. In the confusion, Naruto spotted a high platform walkway from which a figure in heavier armor barked orders. Likely the commander. The man carried a large cylindrical device strapped to his back, etched with complex seals. That's gotta be the ringleader, Naruto said, pointing. Anko eyed the walkway. Think we can get up there? He nodded, tapping into his intangible phasing. Follow me if you can. He sprinted toward the fortress wall. Anko used her serpent jutsu to grapple onto a beam overhead, while Naruto shifted intangible long enough to slip through a rubble barrier, rematerializing on the other side. Two startled mercenaries lunged. He stretched out an elastic arm, clothes lining them. Then he bounded up the crumbling stairs. Anko arrived in a swirl of dust, hacking down another guard. At the top, the commander turned, a sneer twisting his scarred face. You leaf dogs are persistent. Naruto's eyes narrowed. We can do this the hard way or the easy way. The commander let out a grating laugh. I prefer the hard way. He lifted the cylinder from his back, slamming it onto the ground. Chakra seals flared across its surface, and a mechanical hiss filled the air. Anko cursed. That's not good. A wave of scorching heat burst from the device, forming a dome of crackling energy that expanded outward. Naruto gritted his teeth, summoning intangible smoke around his body in an attempt to phase. But the wave hammered him with searing force, sending him tumbling across the walkway. His vision blurred. Damn, he growled, blinking to clear his head. That device was fueling some kind of advanced barrier technique. It might obliterate everything within range. Anko sprang back, a scorch mark on her vest. We have to break that thing before it powers up again. The commander pressed a seal on his forearm, eyes glowing with unnatural chakra. He vaulted forward, lashing out with surprising speed. Anko blocked with twin kunai, sparks flying, but was driven back. Naruto forced himself up, launching a shockwave that rocked the walkway. The commander staggered, but the barrier device pulsed, stabilizing him. Anko hissed. He's feeding off that contraption's power. Naruto's body felt alive with adrenaline. He pressed a palm to the ground, swirling intangible force into it. Gravity twisted around the walkway, immense. The commander stumbled as the floor buckled. With a roar, Naruto propelled himself forward, rubber limbs extending in a flurry of strikes. The commander deflected some hits, each contact echoing with explosive chakra. Naruto's body burned from the feedback. Anko circled, flicking out hidden blades, but the man's defenses were too strong. Time to die, Leaf Shinobi, the commander snarled. A spike of malevolent chakra gathered at the device's tip. Naruto sensed an incoming catastrophic blast that might level half the fortress. In a surge of panic and resolve, he let all of his devil fruit-like powers combine, ignoring the warning pang in his head. Rubber limbs, shockwave focus, intangible swirling darkness, he poured them into a single destructive thrust. The walkway trembled under the onslaught. The commander aimed the weapon, a grin of triumph twisting his face until Naruto's punch connected squarely with the device. A thunderous boom rattled the entire fortress. Flames and shards of metal erupted, swirling in a vortex of black energy that Naruto couldn't fully control. Get back! He shouted to Anko, voice raw. She dove away as the barrier device cracked, energy spiraling into a chaotic swirl. In that split second, Naruto's powers clashed violently with the device's meltdown. A shockwave of monstrous force tore through stone and steel. The walkway collapsed, sending the commander plummeting into a pit of twisted rubble. Naruto felt his body lurch, hammered by the conflicting energies. Something snapped inside him, a white-hot pain as if every nerve lit on fire. His intangible side threatened to scatter, his muscles felt rubbery to the brink of tearing, his mind reeled under gravitational backlash. He blacked out for an instant. Rubble of the fortress, later. When consciousness flickered back, Naruto found himself half buried under broken masonry. Smoke stung his eyes. The acrid smell of charred stone and smoldering metal clogged his lungs. Every inch of him throbbed with agony. He forced himself to move, shoving debris aside. Voices echoed through the haze: Kakashi, Anko, other Konoha shinobi. Then a strong hand gripped his shoulder. He managed to look up, seeing Kakashi's concerned face. Relief surged through the Jonin's single visible eye. "Easy, Naruto. You're banged up. Can you stand?" Naruto coughed, nodding vaguely. "Hurts, but I think so." Someone else helped lift him. Anko appeared on his other side, a gash on her cheek. "Damn, you nearly took the whole fortress down on us," she said, though worry underscored her teasing. He tried to find humor in her tone but only managed a ragged exhale. "Commander, device." Kakashi gestured to a collapsed section where a few medics and shinobi rummaged. "Destroyed. You disabled the barrier and the mercenaries are retreating. We're rounding up survivors and confiscating whatever's left of their weapons." Naruto's vision swam. Pain hammered at his skull, the aftereffects of mixing so many powers. But hearing that the threat was neutralized eased some of the tension. Good. Anko stabilized him as the medics rushed over. Shiori, one of the sensor nin from the earlier mission, knelt to examine Naruto's injuries. "He's suffering severe chakra feedback," she said. Worry etched on her face. "We need to get him back to Konoha for proper treatment." Naruto tried to protest. "I'm fine." Kakashi gave a gentle but firm shake of the head. "You did your job, Naruto. Now let us handle the rest." Naruto sagged, half from relief, half from exhaustion. The pounding in his head blurred the edges of his vision. He let them lead him away from the wreckage, aware only of dull echoes. The moans of injured fighters, the crackling of distant fires, the triumphant shouts of Konoha shinobi who realized they'd won a major victory. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake a darker worry. Something had broken inside him when he unleashed that final blow. How would the council, how would Danzo respond to the destructive proof of his powers? Konoha Hospital. That evening sterile light glowed against white walls as Naruto lay in a bed, monitors beeping softly. The immediate threat to his life had passed. The doctors managed to stabilize his wild fluctuations of energy. Still, each breath felt raw, and waves of fatigue dragged at his consciousness. Ino, Hinata, and even Anko hovered by his bedside, trading worried glances. Tsunade, who'd returned to the village not long ago, oversaw his care, standing at the foot of his bed with a stern expression. "Honestly, kid," she muttered, "it's a miracle you didn't rip yourself apart channeling that much power at once." Naruto tried to muster a smirk. "Guess I'm lucky." Tsunade's gaze softened slightly. "Lucky indeed. For now, rest. I'll run more tests soon." She left them, barking orders at a passing med nin. Anko gave a low whistle. "You've sure got a knack for dramatic finishes." Ino pressed her forehead to his uninjured shoulder. "You idiot, you keep scaring me like that." Hinata held his hand, tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. "We're so glad you're alive, Naruto-kun." Naruto tried to reassure them with a tired grin. "I'm fine, really. The fortress is down, right? That's what matters." Anko reached over, ruffling his hair gently, an uncharacteristic show of tenderness. "You did good, hotshot." Tsunade soon returned, looking more somber. "Naruto, the council's requesting a debrief about your actions." Ino bristled. "He just saved everyone's necks, and they want to lecture him?" Tsunade shrugged, frustration flickering. "We can't ignore politics. The fortress was destroyed, which is a win, but rumor says you unleashed a near cataclysmic wave of power. Danzo's spinning it as proof of how dangerous you are." Naruto swallowed the bitterness on his tongue. He wasn't surprised. "Fine, I'll talk to them." Hinata squeezed his hand. "We'll be right here. Ino nodded. And if they try anything, we'll raise hell. A faint smirk tugged at Naruto's lips. He felt battered inside and out, but the presence of these women of all the friends who truly had his back kept him tethered to hope. Council chamber. 2 days later, word traveled quickly that Naruto had recovered enough to stand before the council. Though still sore, he walked into the chamber unassisted. The room bristled with tension. Danzo, Homura, and Koharu sat with stiff forms. Minato presided, arms crossed, Kushina by his side. Nanami and Shikamaru lingered near the back, observing silently. Homura began, voice clipped. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, we have reviewed the reports of your role in the fortress battle. While your actions contributed to Konoha's success, the scale of destruction you caused is concerning. Koharu pursed her lips. Eyewitnesses describe an almost uncontrollable surge of energy. The barrier device meltdown could have wiped out half our forces if luck hadn't been on your side. Naruto bristled. It was a desperate situation. I used what I had. Danzo's glare pinned him. This only proves how volatile your powers truly are. One miscalculation, and you could level an entire city block. Are we to risk that in every mission? Kushina's face burned with indignation. You keep harping on the risks. He's won 2 major battles for us now. Danzo's voice was cold. And how many more will it take before he loses control completely? We must implement fail-safes. Minato's jaw clenched. Fail-safes? Danzo inclined his head. A specialized seal, perhaps, or a chakra suppression technique. Something to ensure that if Naruto's powers run amok, the village will not be annihilated. A hush gripped the chamber. Naruto felt rage coil in his gut. They wanted to seal him away like a ticking bomb. I'm not letting you slap a seal on me just because you're afraid. Danzo slammed his cane on the floor. It's not a matter of F. Minato quickly stepped in. We will not seal my son like a beast. He cast a sharp gaze around the elders. Konoha thrives because we nurture powerful allies, not muzzle them. The tension soared. Then, unexpectedly, Shikamaru cleared his throat, stepping forward. With all due respect, you're looking at this the wrong way. Naruto's proven that, despite the volatility, he can channel his powers for the village's benefit. He's not some mindless juggernaut. Homura frowned. But the potential for disaster. Shikamaru waved a dismissive hand. Potential for disaster is part of any high-level shinobi's skill set. Look at the Uchiha's Sharingan, the Hyuga's Byakugan, even clan secret jutsu. All can be misused. The difference is trust. If we push Naruto away, we guarantee more risk. Danzo's expression darkened. He seemed poised to argue further, but Minato seized the momentum. Thank you, Shikamaru. We do indeed need trust. And Naruto has earned it. Twice over. A glacial moment stretched. Finally, Danzo exhaled, stepping back. If that is the Hokage's decision, I will abide. But mark my words. If he endangers this village, we will act. Naruto ground his teeth but said nothing. Minato banged the table. Then we are finished here. The elders drifted out, some grudgingly, others stone-faced. Danzo lingered the longest, casting Naruto a final, loaded glance before departing with his rude escort. Kushina wrapped an arm around Naruto. You handled that well, son. He relaxed a fraction, though his mind churned. The tension with Danzo would not simply vanish, but for now, at least, he wasn't chained or sealed. Training Field 17. Sunset. A day later, Naruto found himself back at his favored training ground. Sunset painted the sky in bands of orange and gold. He stood at the center, letting the hush of rustling grass calm his heart. The council confrontation ended with a temporary victory, but Danzo's threat lingered like a dark cloud. Footsteps approached. Ino, Hinata, and Enko all arrived, each carrying a subtle curiosity. They spread around him in a loose circle. Even Shikamaru showed up, hands in his pockets, wearing a bored expression that betrayed his concern. Ino was the first to speak. So, you're still free. No seal, no house arrest. Naruto nodded. For now. Danzo's not done, but I won't live in fear. Hinata mustered a reassuring smile. We believe in you. Enko planted a hand on her hip, letting out a mischievous chuckle. So, we're celebrating with another crazy spar, or what? Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome woman. Can't we have a quiet night? Naruto considered them all, warmth swelling in his chest. They had each chosen to stand by him despite the swirling controversies. I appreciate you all more than you know. Ino stepped close, eyes glimmering. Don't get all mushy. We just want to make sure you're not about to blow up half the village. He laughed lightly, then turned to Hinata. She blushed but stepped forward, letting him clasp her hands. Thank you for always being there, he said. Anko crossed her arms, smirking. Don't forget me, hero boy. I don't offer my time to just anyone. He met her gaze, a grin tugging his lips. Trust me, I won't. Shikamaru ambled to the edge of the clearing, casting a wry glance over his shoulder. All right, lovebirds. I'll give you some space. Just try not to raise the training field. They watched him leave, the sunset glowing behind his silhouette. Then Naruto turned back to the three kunoichi. The mood seemed to shift, a quiet acknowledgement of how fragile their victories were yet also how precious every moment had become. Ino's voice broke the stillness. So, you big unstoppable hero, what now? Naruto looked out at the horizon, the last vestiges of sun dipping below Konoha's walls. Memories flashed. His sister's tearful worry, Minato's conflicted face, the council's stares, Danzo's threats. He thought, too, of the roiling power in his blood devil fruit-like abilities that defied the shinobi world's rules. He exhaled, feeling the weight and the promise of it all. I keep moving forward. The world's not done testing me, and I'm not done proving them wrong. Ino cocked her head, a slow smile forming, and we'll be right here, too. Hinata nodded fervently. Always. Anko flicked a kunai in the air, catching it with casual grace. Sounds like a damn adventure. Naruto extended his arms, surprising them with a confident wink. A risky adventure. But if anyone can handle it, it's us. They shared a moment of unspoken agreement. Then Ino rolled her eyes but grinned, stepping in to kiss him, a firm press of lips that spoke volumes of relief and affection. When she pulled back, Hinata shyly inched forward, brushing her lips softly against Naruto's cheek, her face a hot flush. Anko chuckled at them both, then grabbed Naruto's collar, yanking him in for a quick, heated kiss of her own. The shared closeness was chaotic, heartfelt, and undeniably them. When it was over, Naruto found himself exhaling a shaky laugh. Guess I'm the luckiest idiot in the village. Ino elbowed him lightly. You'd better believe it. With that, they strolled from the clearing, each step marked by quiet banter and stolen touches. The darkness of night settled, but a spark of hope ignited in Naruto's chest. He was no longer the overshadowed, neglected child. He was forging his own legacy, one of godlike potential, complicated alliances, and unbreakable bonds. Threats loomed on every horizon: Danzo, rogue factions, and greater powers like the Akatsuki, but for now, they could savor this reprieve. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt that he truly belonged. Whatever challenges the future held, he would face them head-on, with the strength of his powers and the unwavering support of those who believed in him. And in that, he found a sense of purpose that not even the council's darkest machinations could extinguish. End of Chapter 5 to be continued.